Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Liga Skromane. Liga Skromane was born in 1986 in Latvia, where she grew up in a close-knit family with an older brother and a younger sister. She later moved to Ireland but remained close to her family. It was there that she met her future husband, Andrew Jordan. Despite struggling to connect with new people, the couple married 5 years later and shared big plans for their future. Liga worked at a hotel and lived modestly, but dreamed of opening a yoga retreat center in Portugal. Andrew supported her idea, and they saved money for 4 years to make it a reality. In early 2018, Liga was suffering from a severe skin condition that was affecting her physical and mental well-being. Her sister Ilzie invited her on a trip to help her overcome this condition and regain her emotional balance. In February 2018, Liga and Ilzie traveled to Thiruvananthapuram, the capital of Kerala, India, where Liga could receive Ayurvedic treatment for depression. Ayurveda, recognized by the World Health Organization since 1985 as one of the most effective alternative medicine systems, offered a promising solution for Liga's health issues. It's important to note that Ayurveda is not a cure-all, but rather a complementary approach to achieving healthy longevity. Liga, 33, and her sister Ilzie traveled to Kerala seeking spiritual growth and relief from depression at an Ayurveda center. Their 6-week treatment plan included yoga, meditation, herbal remedies, and personalized nutrition and massage guidance. On March 14th, Liga skipped a yoga class, citing a headache. When Ilzie returned to their room, Liga was gone. With the hotel staff's help, Ilzie discovered that Liga had left the hotel at 11:30 a.m. in casual clothing, taking an auto rickshaw to Kovalam Beach for a walk. However, Liga was nowhere to be found on the beach, despite Ilzie's thorough search until nightfall. Ilzie reported her sister's disappearance to the police, but they showed little concern, believing Liga would either be found or return on her own the next day. Although they registered a case, the investigation was sluggish, effectively stalled from the start. Ilzie took her sister Liga on a trip to India to share with her the country she loved so deeply. Tragically, the trip took a devastating turn. When the Indian police failed to take action for several days, Ilzie decided to take matters into her own hands and began searching for Liga. She received support from friends and also informed her husband Andrew about Liga's disappearance, prompting him to fly to India immediately. After Liga went missing, her husband Andrew Jordan and sister Ilzie launched a campaign to find her, reaching out to the local press and creating an online appeal. Ilzie also tweeted to India's Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj, pleading for help and offering a 100,000 rupee reward to anyone with information about Liga's disappearance. Ilzie and her friend Alexa, who had flown to India to help with the search, put up posters and distributed flyers in the Kovalam Beach area where Liga was last seen. Many locals joined the search efforts. However, it's important to note that Liga struggled with depression and found it difficult to interact with strangers. On the day she vanished, she took an auto rickshaw to the beach and was never seen again. At the time, she had about 3,000 rupees with her, but no passport, which meant she couldn't leave the country. Ashok Kumar, the head of the local police station, claimed that they had no leads in Liga's disappearance. Initially, the police believed she might have gone on a drinking binge or eloped and would eventually return on her own. However, persistent requests for help from Ilzie and Andrew prompted the police to launch a search operation in the Kovalam Beach area where Liga was last seen. Although a woman's body was found washed ashore in Kanyakumari district, it was not identified as Liga's. Andrew suspected that Liga had been kidnapped by local gangs to be sold, and he attempted to infiltrate these gangs to gather more information. However, he was exposed and warned that if he continued to contact the gangs, he would have to leave the country. A month after Liga's disappearance, there were still no leads to her whereabouts. Ilzie continued to search for her sister, visiting Kovalam Beach daily and observing people. She developed a theory that the only way to leave the beach unnoticed was by boat. Andrew returned to India on April 17, 2018, and joined Ilzie in a new effort to find Liga, but her body remained unfound. The search for Liga was made more challenging due to her being a tourist and a citizen of another country. The Latvian Foreign Ministry maintained close contact with Liga's family and collaborated with the Indian authorities throughout the search process. The Latvian embassy also reached out to the Indian Foreign Ministry for special assistance in finding Liga. Additionally, the honorary consul of Latvia in India, whose jurisdiction includes the region where Liga went missing, was involved in the search efforts. At the request of the Coral State government, the Indian Navy and Air Force participated in the search operation. The search effort was extensive, utilizing an AN-32 transport plane, Gemini inflatable boats, underwater sonar, and 5 deep-sea divers. Unfortunately, despite these efforts, Liga remained missing and the desired outcome was not achieved. By this point, everyone in the local community was aware of the missing tourist from Latvia and was supporting and sympathizing with Andrew and Ilzie. On April 20, 2018, Ila received the most awaited yet devastating call of her life. A body had been found in the mangrove jungle. She and Andrew rushed to the designated spot where the police were waiting to take them to the scene by boat. Elsa's heart was racing as she felt the overwhelming horror of the situation. As they arrived, Elsa was met with a gruesome sight. She recognized her sister's clothes, including the shirt and leggings, on the body. However, the jacket and shoes did not belong to Liga. It remained a mystery how Liga had ended up in this remote location, accessible only by going through Panatur from Samudra Beach. 2 women came forward, confirming that they had seen Liga traveling alone into the mangrove forest. But the question remained, why would a girl struggling with depression, already alone, take a boat to such a remote and inaccessible place in the forest? The body was taken to the Medical College Hospital for an autopsy, which was recorded on video. The police stated that they couldn't confirm the identity of the body until DNA analysis was complete. According to the city police commissioner, the body was severely mutilated, with the head found nearby. Although the police have tentatively identified the deceased as Liga, a missing tourist, they need DNA confirmation. Supporting the investigators' conclusion is the fact that Liga's relatives identified the victim by her hair and clothes. One possible theory, according to India's rescue services, is that Liga might have been poisoned by accidentally or intentionally eating the fruit of poisonous pong trees found in the mangrove forest. Between 1989 and 1999, over 500 people died from poisoning by these fruits in Kerala alone. The idea initially seemed absurd, given the body was found hanging upside down, without a head. However, if Liga had been poisoned, her body would likely have been in a different position, and her head would have been in place. Indian authorities were spouting absurdities based on misinformation about Liga's complex psychological issues. The investigators also considered the possibility that Liga had willingly abandoned her life. Ilzie was concerned that the police would try to cover up her sister's murder by claiming she had voluntarily ended her life, despite the presence of a rope at the scene, which suggested the hiker had hanged herself. Elsa demanded a credible explanation for the missing head, and Ilzie sarcastically retorted, "Don't tell me it's just lost." Here are the forensic test results that Ilzie and the public were waiting for. The evidence is overwhelming. The autopsy reveals that Liga Skromane was strangled to death by multiple people during a violent attack. There were blood pools in her brain, bruising on her neck, and external injuries on her body, likely sustained during the struggle. Although the body was decomposing, the characteristic injuries on her throat cartilage indicate that someone forcefully squeezed her throat. The trauma was severe and fatal. Blood clots in her brain confirm strangulation, and bruises were found on her neck and legs, with a total of 9 wounds recorded on her body. Based on the autopsy results, the police no longer consider Liga's death to be voluntary. Instead, They believe she was murdered after putting up a struggle. Ilzie, Liga's sister, felt a sense of relief that the police were now taking the case seriously and hoped they would soon find the killers. As part of their investigation, the police started questioning local drug dealers and card players. They also spoke to local residents, two of whom reported seeing Liga walking alone to the area where her body was later discovered. However, the police had doubts about the credibility of these eyewitnesses. Liga's family has criticized the Indian police, accusing them of incompetence. They believe that if the police had launched a search for Liga immediately, the tragedy might have been prevented. The 33-year-old Latvian tourist is thought to have been kidnapped from a nearby beach, taken by boat, and then strangled. A special team of investigators has been formed to find those responsible for the crime. So far, around 40 suspects have been questioned, and arrests are expected to be made in the coming days once the authorities have gathered sufficient evidence. The Indian police conducted an investigation that led to the arrest of two men who were accused of murdering Liga Skromane. According to the police, Liga Skromane was lured by the two men, who then subjected her to physical abuse before dismembering her body. The two alleged assailants, now in custody, were local dealers of illegal substances. Both suspects, who were also pimps, fully confessed to the crime while under interrogation. However, the autopsy did not provide much evidence due to the advanced state of decomposition of Liga Skromane's body. Andrew Jordan filed a petition in Superior Court to review a felony murder case, suspecting that more people were involved in the woman's murder. He noted that both defendants had recanted their guilty pleas, suggesting that they may have confessed due to torture, a common practice in India. However, the Supreme Court of India denied the murdered woman's common-law husband a review of the case, citing a lack of direct evidence. Andrew was outraged when the trial was postponed for 2 months. He had previously accused the authorities and police of incompetence and attempting to cover up the murder to avoid scaring off tourists. The suspect's lawyers requested and received a postponement, which they are legally entitled to do once without providing a reason. Andrew believed that the more the case was delayed, the more likely it was that the investigation was flawed. Despite his concerns, both suspects remained in custody. An investigation into Liga Skromane's murder revealed that two men, Umesh, 32, and Udayakumar, 28, offered her drugs, specifically Liga Skromane weed, and then strangled and decapitated her after she was incapacitated. The two suspects were arrested and found to have a history of committing similar crimes on multiple occasions. They worked for a food delivery company in Kerala's capital city and moonlighted as illegal tour guides. Umesh and Udayakumar have been charged with multiple crimes, including destruction of evidence, murder, poisoning, kidnapping, and rape. The location where Liga's body was discovered had previously been used by Umesh as a meeting spot for his male clients. He has a long history of criminal activity, with 13 cases filed against him, including 6 for sexual assault and 1 for attempted murder. Several of Umesh's victims have come forward to testify against him. Multiple witnesses reported seeing Liga with the two men in the area. Initially, they denied any involvement, but after Liga's body was found, they confessed to the murder, which was committed during an act of violence. The suspects were arrested, but initially claimed they only saw Liga in Kovalam. After repeated questioning, they eventually pleaded guilty. On December 6, 2022, the court sentenced the two men to life in prison and ordered them to pay 65,000 rupees each in compensation to Ilzie, Liga's sister. India has seen a surge in violent crimes against young girls, with a high number of sexual offenses committed against minors. In response, the government has introduced the death penalty to address the acute problem of crime in the country. The persistence of Liga's relatives, particularly her sister, and the involvement of the press and an influential MP were crucial in ensuring the case was thoroughly investigated. Initially, the local police were not taking the case seriously, suggesting that Liga may have voluntarily disappeared. This is not an isolated incident in this area, where similar cases have occurred before. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ilzie Cutshall. Ilzie was born in 1982 in Ohio and grew up in a very religious family. She was an active and adventurous person, interested in sports, hiking, and extreme tourism. She attended Appalachian Bible College in West Virginia and dreamed of founding her own summer camp for children and teenagers. Jason, on the other hand, was born in 1978 in Michigan and also grew up in a deeply religious family. He was interested in hiking tours, mastering survival in the wild, and had leadership qualities. The couple met in 2002 during a hiking trip in Appalachia and immediately felt a mutual connection. They got engaged 6 months later and planned to get married in September 2004, with big plans for their future together. Ilzie and Jason, senior counselors at a Christian summer camp in California, had plans to start their own relationship. In the summer of 2004, they decided to take a weekend trip to the San Francisco area. They informed their colleagues in advance, leaving 2 experienced counselors in charge, and promised to return by Monday. They set off in Ilzie's 1992 red Ford Tempo, but that was the last time anyone saw them alive. By Sunday evening, they hadn't returned, but no alarm was raised, as everyone was confident they would arrive late that night or early Monday morning. However, when they still hadn't returned after the morning roll call at 8 a.m., their colleagues contacted the police and informed the missing couple's families. The police investigation faced a significant problem. No one knew precisely where they had gone. They had planned to explore around San Francisco, and their love for adventure and extreme leisure made it possible they could be in remote areas with no communication or civilization. While the police waited for the legally mandated 2 days, during which the missing were expected to report themselves, relatives and friends organized a search effort. They distributed flyers with photos of the couple and requested anyone who might have seen them to respond immediately. By Tuesday, law enforcement had joined the search operation, focusing on San Francisco, its suburbs, and surroundings. However, the area was vast, making it impossible to thoroughly search it. A friend's suggestion that the couple loved wild, rocky beaches prompted the police to focus on these areas. The search yielded no results for several days, and hope of finding the couple alive was rapidly diminishing. Then, on Wednesday, August 19th, a patrol helicopter flying over one of the rocky, wild beaches reported finding 2 bodies in sleeping bags. The police arrived at the scene to find the red Ford Tempo parked on a cliff near a lookout point and a steep trail leading directly to the beach. The car was identified as belonging to Ilzie Cutshall. Descending the trail to the beach, officers found 2 individuals in bright sleeping bags. Initially, it seemed like they were just sleeping, but they didn't respond to calls or noise. Upon closer inspection, officers discovered that the sleeping bags contained a young man and woman, both showing no signs of life. A brief examination suggested that they had died from gunshot wounds to the head, and the distinctive smell of decomposition indicated they had been there for more than a day. All of the victims' belongings, including mobile phones, wallets containing bank cards and cash, were found beside them, ruling out robbery as a motive. The keys to their parked car above were also visibly placed, eliminating car theft as a motive. Investigators immediately suspected that the deceased were the same young couple who had gone missing last week near San Francisco. This was later confirmed by documents found nearby, identifying them as Ilzie Cutshall and Jason Allen. The investigation revealed that the couple's bodies had no signs of physical or intimate assault, except for the gunshot wounds to the head. It appeared that Ilzie and Jason were sleeping peacefully at the time of the incident and didn't have a chance to react or defend themselves. The lack of signs of struggle or escape attempts suggested a swift and brutal act, resembling an execution or vendetta. The questions surrounding the case multiplied, but no answers were forthcoming. There were no signs of anyone else having stayed in the area, and the secluded beach was only accessible via a steep trail. Despite efforts, no shell casings were found nearby, leading investigators to theorize that the shooter either took them or threw them into the ocean. The shots had been fired at close range into the victims' heads, indicated by specific traces. An empty beer bottle from a rare brand, not commonly found in the area, was discovered a few meters from the sleeping bags. Since the victims didn't drink alcohol, it was possible that the bottle belonged to the shooter. This was considered a significant lead, although it was unclear whether it had any connection to the shooter or the crime. One theory proposed that the couple might have had a conflict with someone the day before the tragedy, and their opponent returned at night with a weapon to settle the score. Although Jason and Lindsay were very friendly with everyone, it was possible that they might have inadvertently displeased someone. The investigation considered the possibility that the shooter was intoxicated or mentally unstable. A crucial clue was found in the rare Marlin brand rifle, .45 caliber Model 18, produced in 1994, which was identified from the bullets extracted from the victims' skulls. Based on this, investigators speculated that the shooter was likely a male acting alone, possibly a hunter or firearm enthusiast. To piece together their final hours, investigators analyzed the photos they took and the guest book entries they wrote in the tourist cabin near the lookout point. They had stopped at a fishing pier about 20 miles away, which was confirmed by witness accounts and photographs. They had searched for a place to stay overnight, but found no vacancies in nearby hotels due to the peak tourist season. They then dined at a local restaurant, took a walk, and set off again in the evening. Witnesses reported that they were friendly and showed no signs of conflict. However, they had decided to camp on the prohibited beach, using their sleeping bags instead of a tent, believing they faced no threats on a warm August night. The investigation narrowed down the time frame of the crime to between 11 p.m. on Saturday and dawn on Sunday, when the couple likely went to sleep but did not survive until morning. Initially, suspicion fell on a local drifter who was seen nearby on the evening before the crime, but he was quickly cleared due to lack of evidence and DNA mismatch. The investigation into the double homicide stalled for nearly 2 years until the spring of 2006, when the police decided to release details of the weapon used in the crime and offered a $50,000 reward for any useful information. This led to around 1,000 calls, although most did not advance the investigation. However, the police became interested in 26-year-old Sean Gallen, who was pointed out by several locals. According to them, Gallen collected firearms and bladed weapons, behaved aggressively, and was frequently involved in conflicts, threatened acts of violence, and occasionally damaged other people's property. Gallen was arrested and questioned, but he had previously been on the police's radar for brawling, hooliganism, and driving under the influence of alcohol and drugs. He indeed had an impressive collection of weapons, but the specific rifle in question was not among them. Verifying his alibi from 2 years prior proved impossible, and his DNA did not match the sample found on the beer bottle at the crime scene, so Gallen had to be released. Simultaneously, another suspicious and aggressive drifter, 61-year-old Joseph Henry Burgess, came under scrutiny. He was often seen with a firearm, frightening local residents. It was discovered that in the late 1970s, Burgess lived in Canada, where he joined the Commune of the Children of God, positioning himself as a deeply religious person. However, he soon had a conflict with 2 young people that escalated into outright enmity, and a few weeks later, these individuals were found lifeless, each with several close-range gunshot wounds to the head. Notably, their bodies were also discovered on a beach in sleeping bags, seemingly taken while they slept. By the time the police arrived, Burgess had vanished, and his guilt was proven through numerous left-behind clues. However, he could not be convicted as he had fled to the USA, crossing the border illegally, and managed to evade capture for nearly a quarter of a century. Fast forward to 2017 in Forestville, California, a tragedy unfolded one night on March 14th. Gunshots rang out in the Gallen family home, prompting alarmed neighbors to immediately call the police. The victim was 35-year-old Seamus Gallen, and the perpetrator was his older brother, Sean. An argument had erupted between the siblings, during which Sean, under the influence of prohibited substances, grabbed a firearm and discharged 3 bullets into his younger brother. The police recognized the shooter's name, as Sean had previously been detained as a suspect in a double homicide on a beach, but was released due to a lack of evidence. Since then, he had been on the police's radar twice for property damage and making threats, but had only received fines. It was also discovered that the detainee was an avid hunter and had a hobby of crafting knives and other bladed weapons. Those around him described him as antisocial, aggressive, and unpredictable. After taking his brother's life, Sean attempted to flee but was almost immediately apprehended. Law enforcement reopened the case and took a closer look at a man who was a potential suspect 13 years earlier. On his social media, he had posted pictures of his large collection of weapons and claimed to have telepathic and extrasensory abilities. He believed he was on a special mission, receiving assignments from space, which suggested that he had a disturbed mind. The police suspected that he had serious mental health issues. He refused to cooperate with the investigation, spoke nonsensically, and maintained his innocence. However, when detectives checked the personal messages on his deceased brother's social media page, they found something interesting. Back in 2006, when a $50,000 reward was offered for information on the double homicide case, Sean's former girlfriend had sent a message to his brother, suggesting that she could claim the reward by turning in her ex-boyfriend. They both knew the truth, but kept silent. Unfortunately, it was no longer possible to question either of them, since the brother had been shot and the woman had died in a car accident 2 years earlier. When shown the printouts of the messages between his former girlfriend and his brother, Sean surprisingly confessed and began to give a detailed account of the crime. Despite it being over 13 years since the double homicide, Sean remembered the details of that night vividly. He claimed that he had left his house with a Marlin rifle, intending to hunt in a wooded area. He wandered aimlessly for a couple of hours before descending to a wild beach, which he claimed was a spot to encounter bears. As he walked along the shore, he spotted 2 bright sleeping bags and discovered a young man and woman sound asleep inside. He stood watching them for several minutes before suddenly hearing voices in his head commanding him to end their lives. Sean claimed this was the mission from space he could not ignore. He placed the barrel of his rifle almost against the young man's head and pulled the trigger. The sound woke the young woman, but before she could comprehend the situation, a second shot ended her life as well. Sean Gallen committed a brutal double homicide on a beach. After shooting the couple, he collected the shell casings and took them away in an empty beer can. He then gave the rifle to his father, asking him to hide it. The father buried the rifle in the cellar of his old barn without asking any questions. Years later, when Sean was arrested, he blamed the voices in his head for ordering him to commit violent acts. His defense team claimed he was mentally ill and unfit to stand trial. However, a forensic psychiatric evaluation revealed that although Sean suffered from mental disorders exacerbated by substance abuse, he had deliberately planned and executed the crime. The evaluation showed that Sean was fully aware of his actions and had taken steps to cover his tracks and avoid police detection. This included killing the young man first, knowing the woman would be unable to resist, and taking the casings with him to hide evidence. What was surprising was that Sean's family members and former girlfriend had suspected or known about his involvement in the crime, but none of them had reported him to the police. Sean was eventually tried and sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without parole, plus an additional 94 years for killing his own brother in 2017. He is currently serving his sentence in a special prison unit for dangerous inmates with mental disorders, where he is kept under close surveillance due to his aggressive behavior and claims of hearing voices. The motive behind the double homicide was never established, with Sean simply deciding to end the couple's lives because he saw them sleeping on the beach. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Rebecca Bleefnick. Becky and Tim first met while they were students at Quincy University. Becky was studying biology and was also a talented tennis player, whereas Tim made a name for himself as a standout football player, earning all-star status. People who knew Tim well would often describe him as a fun-loving and playful guy who always greeted others with a warm hug. His lively personality and infectious energy made him extremely popular among his peers. On the other hand, Becky's friends would often say that she was a happy and vibrant person who could light up a room just by being there. Her positive attitude and bright smile made her instantly likable and approachable. Given that Becky and Tim were both attractive individuals, they seemed to be a perfect match for each other. Their physical appearance and chemistry together made them appear like the ideal couple. 2 years after graduating from Quincy University, Becky and Tim decided to start a new chapter in their lives by getting married. As a practical couple, they prioritized saving money over unnecessary expenses. Instead of buying Becky an expensive engagement ring, Tim decided to put their savings towards a down payment on their first home. They also opted for a more low-key honeymoon, choosing to invest their money in their future together rather than splurging on lavish celebrations. Becky wanted to be a doctor, but opted out to focus on motherhood. She craved the joy and fulfillment that came with raising kids. Her dream came true with 3 sons, bringing her immense joy and treasured moments. As the boys grew older, Becky decided to pursue her own goals and aspirations. She went back to school to earn a nursing degree. Tim, who had a talent for entertaining, had performed in community theater in Quincy and created humorous videos on social media. In 2008, he tried out for American Gladiators, making it to the final round of auditions. In September 2019, he got another chance to showcase his talent when the producers of Family Feud invited him and his family to participate in the show. However, Becky was unable to join him due to her nursing school commitments. Tim then gathered his family, including his parents and brothers, to take advantage of the opportunity. Tim's family, the Biancs, appeared on Family Feud for 3 episodes and won a total of $20,000. They divided the money equally among themselves, but Tim did not share his winnings with his wife Becky. Becky and Tim's marriage had been struggling for a while, particularly when Becky decided to become a nurse. Tim was against this career choice, claiming he was worried about the stress it would bring Becky. He said she already had trouble managing her patients and stress levels when dealing with their kids, and he wondered if she could handle the demands of the job. However, Becky's friends saw Tim's opposition differently. They thought he was uncomfortable with Becky being independent and doing things outside of his control. As time went on, Becky's friends noticed she was becoming increasingly unhappy in her marriage. While the first 5 years had been relatively positive, Tim's behavior had become more controlling and manipulative. Becky's friends observed that she was shouldering the bulk of the household responsibilities, in addition to her demanding nursing studies and job, while Tim did not pull his weight. He rarely lifted a finger to clean or care for their children, leaving Becky to handle everything on her own after her long nursing shifts. As Becky recognized the growing tensions in their marriage, she felt compelled to discuss the issue with Tim. She believed that attending marriage counseling could help them identify solutions and restore harmony to their relationship. However, Tim refused to consider counseling, which disappointed Becky. Despite Becky's efforts to address the problems in their marriage, Tim filed for divorce in January 2021. after 11 years of marriage. This caught Becky off guard, as she had demonstrated her commitment to saving their marriage. Tim claimed that the reason for his decision was a perceived change in Becky's personality after she became a nurse, which he believed had negatively impacted their marriage. Tim and Becky's divorce was extremely contentious. The couple found it difficult to agree on anything and stopped communicating effectively. They disagreed on several key issues, including who would get custody of the children, how to divide their property, and how much alimony would be paid. From Tim's perspective, the situation was already volatile. He even went so far as to request a restraining order against Becky, citing a specific incident where she became aggressive during a heated argument at a parent-teacher conference. However, Becky had a different viewpoint. She alleged that Tim was harassing her and confided in her friends through text messages. In these messages, she described several disturbing incidents, including Tim yelling at her, pushing her in front of their sons, and throwing objects across the room. Becky's anxiety was fueled by her fear that Tim might take drastic action to keep her away from their children. After a coworker was tragically murdered by her partner, Becky became increasingly concerned about her own safety, believing that Tim was capable of harming her in a similar way. Becky's sister was concerned about her sister's safety, so she encouraged Becky to seek help at a domestic violence resource center. After some time, Becky made the decision to file a restraining order against Tim, alleging that he had entered her home without her permission and had lied about their interactions. When a judge reviewed the competing orders of protection filed by Tim and Becky, he ruled against granting either of them. Instead, he ordered the two to maintain a safe distance from each other's homes, with the exception of when they exchanged custody of their children. However, in February 2023, Tim reached out to the Quincy Police Department, informing them that he refused to return a gun, citing his reluctance to hand it over to that crazy person, a clear reference to Becky. Becky and Tim were getting divorced, and it was going to be finalized in a week. At that time, their 3 sons, aged 12, 10, and 5, were staying at Tim's house, which was just a mile away from Becky's home. The next day, Tim contacted Becky's father, saying he couldn't reach Becky and that she had not picked the boys up from school as planned. Becky's father was worried because he knew how dedicated Becky was as a mother. He thought something must have happened to prevent her from taking care of her responsibilities. Concerned about Becky's well-being, her father drove to her house and went inside, calling out her name. But there was no response. He went upstairs to her bedroom and found a shocking and disturbing scene. Becky was lying on her back in a pool of blood with multiple gunshot wounds. Detectives and crime scene investigators promptly responded to Becky's house after her father's disturbing discovery of her lifeless body in the bathroom, lying face up and covered in blood. Their meticulous investigation began with a thorough examination of the exterior of Becky's home, which led to a comprehensive search to identify the point of entry. The search revealed that an upstairs window in one of the children's bedrooms had been pried open, suggesting the perpetrator used a patio chair to climb up to the roof and gain access to the house. Following the suspect's likely path, investigators proceeded to Becky's bedroom, where they found signs of forced entry on the door, indicating it had been violently kicked down or broken. The state of the bedroom door implied to investigators that the suspect had burst into the room, likely in search of Becky. Evidence suggested Becky tried to hide in the bathroom, but the suspect caught up and shot her. Investigators found her phone near her body and saw a 1:11 a.m. 911 call. They believe Becky tried to call for help while being chased, but dialed wrong and was knocked to the ground before she could try again. When officers canvassed Becky's neighborhood, no one recalled hearing anything suspicious. The lack of witnesses raised suspicions, given Becky's multiple gunshot wounds. A thorough search of her house ruled out a botched burglary, as nothing was missing. Investigators found a partial shoe print, 8 9mm shell casings, and shredded plastic near the body. Despite this evidence, they were unsure what to make of it, so they sent it to forensic labs for analysis. Detectives sought neighbors' security cameras. One neighbor had a camera on their house, facing their driveway, which bordered Becky's home. It turned on with movement, but didn't catch anything on the night of her death. However, it did capture a person walking down her driveway at 1:05 a.m. the day before, and again 48 minutes later. Becky's neighbor had also caught a similar incident on camera about a week before the main event, on February 14th. When Becky's neighbors reviewed their security footage on Valentine's Day, they saw a suspicious, dark-clad figure lurking around her house. They immediately informed Becky, who became paranoid after learning about the mysterious figure. Although Becky claimed she hadn't seen anyone on her property, she had heard strange voices in her backyard the previous night, which frightened her even more considering the security footage. The police extended their search to the rest of the neighborhood, looking for more footage of the dark-clad individual. They found videos from a house near the Quincy bus barn, which showed a person dressed in dark clothing riding a bike toward Becky's house. These additional videos were consistent with the description of the mysterious person seen in the driveway footage, showing someone riding a bike while wearing dark clothing. After analyzing the recorded times of the videos, detectives became suspicious that the person on the bike was the same individual seen in the footage from Becky's driveway. Although Becky's neighbor's security camera didn't capture the mysterious person on the night of her murder, officers found footage of someone on a bike riding towards and away from Becky's house around the time of the incident. This person's appearance matched the description of the individual seen lurking in Becky's driveway in the days leading up to her murder. Video evidence helped in Becky's murder investigation, but poor quality footage limited its usefulness. The grainy image made it hard to identify the person's gender. However, detectives did note the bike lacked reflectors on its wheels. Becky's sister suspected her estranged husband Tim of murder, having witnessed their bitter divorce. She told detectives, who then investigated Tim. The timing was suspicious, as the murder occurred a week before their divorce was to be finalized. A bike without reflectors, like one seen near Tim's house on security footage, was found, increasing suspicion and leading to a search warrant for Tim's home. When the police executed the search warrant, Tim was compliant and respectful throughout the search. He willingly stood outside his home, accompanied by the officers, as investigators looked through his belongings. On March 13, 2023, 2 weeks after Becky was murdered, Tim was arrested and charged with her murder. Tim's mugshot shocked his friends and family, showing a disheveled, unkempt man. Many thought the divorce had taken a toll on his health, but Tim claimed he was growing his hair out for a cancer charity. After his bizarre response on Family Feud, saying he regretted marrying his wife and his subsequent arrest for her murder, many saw it as a warning sign of sinister intentions. The investigators thoroughly examined Tim's phone and discovered that he had created a Facebook account under the name John Smith. Through their investigation, the detectives learned that Tim was searching for a bicycle on Facebook and found a blue Schwinn without any reflectors on the wheels. This discovery was intriguing as it matched the description of a bike found abandoned 1 block away from Tim's residence. Detectives faced a challenge when Tim was arrested, held without bond, and demanded a speedy trial. With only 90 days to build a case, prosecutors struggled to convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt without a confession or DNA evidence. 3 months after Becky's murder, Tim's trial began on May 23, 2023. The prosecution presented evidence, including shredded plastic pieces found near Becky's body, which they claimed were from an Aldi grocery bag. Similar bags were found at Tim's house. The prosecutor argued Tim used the bags as a silencer when shooting Becky and that he left DNA on them. An expert testified that Tim was likely the DNA contributor and his DNA couldn't be excluded from under Becky's fingernails. Prosecutors presented a crowbar found in Tim's basement, suggesting it was used to pry open the victim's window. An expert confirmed similarities, but couldn't confirm it was the same crowbar. They also presented Tim's phone searches, including how to open a door with a crowbar and other incriminating queries. An expert testified that shell casings from the crime scene matched those found at Tim's house, suggesting the same 9mm gun was used. However, the gun, which Tim had refused to give back to Becky, was never found at his house. Jury delivers guilty verdict after 4-hour deliberation, sentencing Tim to life without parole. Becky's family feels justice is served, despite Tim's claims of innocence and plans to appeal. At sentencing, Becky's sister condemned Tim's actions, saying his choices hurt his sons, and vowed, friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Dalia DiPolito. On a warm afternoon in Kovalam Beach, Florida, a man named Muhammad walked into the police department to report a disturbing incident. He told the police that he had been approached by a woman named Delilah who had asked him to commit murder. Muhammad claimed that Delilah had offered to hire him for this task, but he failed to provide her last name. Despite this crucial omission, the Kovalam Beach Police Department found Muhammad's story believable and decided to launch an investigation. The detective's task was to identify the mysterious Delilah and determine who her husband was. To gather more information, they decided to use Muhammad as bait to set up a meeting with Delilah. They chose the mobile gas station as the meeting location. As Muhammad said, Delilah lived nearby. At the mobile gas station, the detectives set up several surveillance vehicles to monitor the meeting. Before Delilah arrived, they briefed Muhammad on what to say to her. The detectives discreetly fitted Muhammad with a wire and recorder, allowing them to secretly record his conversation with Delilah as it happened. As the detectives kept watch on the mobile gas station, they focused on the exchange between Muhammad and a woman named Delilah. What struck the detectives as unusual was Delilah's appearance, which didn't fit the typical profile of someone seeking to have their husband killed. Clad in a skirt and tank top, she seemed quite attractive. Delilah got into the car with Muhammad. Muhammad expressed his disbelief that she was dragging him into a murder-for-hire plot. He asked her if it was worth getting someone killed, and Delilah confirmed that it was. Her reason was that she couldn't file for divorce because she feared her husband would retaliate against her if she tried to end their marriage and divide their assets. During their conversation, the woman openly admitted that she had planned to create an alibi for herself by going to a different location, such as Boca Raton, at the time of her husband's murder. When Muhammad asked if anyone would suspect her of involvement in her husband's death, she confidently replied that no one would suspect her. The detectives were stunned as they listened to Muhammad's conversation with the woman who was seeking to have her husband killed. They were particularly shocked by her casual and nonchalant attitude towards hiring a hitman to commit the murder. As they continued to listen, the woman even went as far as to show Muhammad pictures of her husband, providing him with a visual description of the intended target. The detectives were stunned by the woman's brazen lack of concern about the consequences of her actions. Her relaxed behavior and tone made it seem like she was discussing a routine business deal, not arranging for someone's murder. During the conversation, the woman made a shocking admission to Muhammad. She revealed that she planned to pay a deposit to a hitman to kill her husband. This admission was a major breakthrough for the detectives, as it confirmed their suspicions of soliciting murder. However, they knew they needed more evidence to build a stronger case. The woman suggested to Muhammad that she would withdraw $1,000 in cash and hand it over to the hitman at a later time. After completing her conversation with Muhammad about hiring someone to kill her husband, the woman got back into her vehicle and drove away from the mobile gas station. The detectives trailed behind her, gathering information about her residential address. Upon conducting a records check, they discovered that the address was actually registered under the name Dahlia Diao, not Dalila, as they had initially thought. Armed with this new information, the detectives investigated the vehicle Dahlia used to travel to the gas station, where she met with Muhammad. This led them to discover the registered owner's name, her husband, Mike Dew. To their friends, Mike and Dahlia seemed like a loving and happy couple. Mike and Dahlia met when Mike was bored at work and browsing the internet to pass the time. He stumbled upon a website offering escort services and decided to order one. Unbeknownst to him, this decision would alter his life forever. When the escort arrived, Mike was immediately captivated by her beauty. He thought she was stunning, and a spark developed between them instantly. They found themselves deeply engaged in friendly conversation over the next few days. Mike and Dahlia's friendship blossomed, and they spent an entire weekend together soon after. The time they shared was enjoyable, and they quickly realized that their connection went beyond friendship. From that moment on, Mike and Dahlia formed a committed partnership. A few months into their relationship, they stumbled upon an engagement ring store while browsing at a local jewelry shop, which sparked a conversation about marriage, a topic they had previously discussed. Mike became captivated by the idea of spending his life with Dahlia and decided to purchase a ring, symbolizing his commitment to their future together. Despite their relationship progressing rapidly, Mike felt deeply happy and in love. Prior to meeting Dahlia, Mike had served a prison sentence in 2001 for grand theft and fraudulent phone sales. He was convicted in Broward County, Florida, 2 years after the initial offenses. At the time, Mike was struggling with drug addiction and was in dire need of money, which he later acknowledged was no excuse for his actions. Mike received a 2-year prison sentence, accompanied by 28 years of probation. The court's intention behind this lengthy probation period was to give Mike sufficient time to repay his debt. However, upon his release, Mike was uncertain about how he would manage to do so. Determined to repay his debt, Mike landed a cooking job at a restaurant, earning $350 weekly, but it was far from enough to make a significant dent in the substantial amount he owed. He wanted a better financial situation to pay off his debt and secure his release from probation. A friend helped Mike transition from cooking to email marketing by offering him an office job just 4 blocks from his house. As Mike started dating Dahlia, he eventually opened up about his probation, informing her about the limitations of his situation, including the need for permission to leave the state. Dahlia expressed her desire to explore the world with Mike, but Mike's debt was a major obstacle. Dahlia then approached Mike with an offer to help him get out from under his debt, proposing that she give him $91,000 if he provided the remainder, which would allow them to clear the debt and embark on a travel-filled life that Dahlia longed for. At the time, Dahlia, a real estate agent, earned a good income. Her financial stability enabled her to help Mike clear his debt and restore his reputation. To resolve the situation, Mike consulted his attorney, who advised him to raise the required funds, promising that Mike would be cleared of his probation once he did so. Dahlia and Mike, following their attorney's guidance, agreed that the safest and most convenient approach would be for Dahlia to deposit the money into her Bank of America account. Since Mike had recently gotten married and was eager to settle his probation, he was thrilled when Dahlia informed him that she had wired the money to his attorney from her account. However, when Mike inquired about the transfer status, his attorney disappointingly told him that the funds had not yet been received from Dahlia. Mike grew increasingly worried and contacted his attorney again, only to be told that they still hadn't received anything. Dahlia claimed she had sent the money to the attorney, but couldn't explain the delay or why they hadn't gotten it. 2 days had passed since the transaction, yet the attorney remained empty-handed. Mike asked Dahlia to reveal where she had sent the funds, explaining he needed the receipt to double-check the transaction details. Dahlia, however, suspected that the attorney might have stolen the money. Meanwhile, Mike hoped to move past the misunderstanding with Dahlia. In the meantime, a supervisor from the Boone Beach Police Department reached out to Sergeant Whitey Jean, an undercover officer, for assistance. The detective briefed Sergeant Whitey Jean on the case, telling him that Dahlia was trying to hire someone to kill her husband. The detective asked Sergeant Whitey Jean to pretend to be the hitman and arrange a meeting with Dahlia. Sergeant Whitey Jean agreed to help and took on the role of the hitman. Pretending to be the hitman, Sergeant Whitey Jean contacted Dahlia and demanded $3,000 up front and the key to her house. The detective had requested the key as part of their plan to make Dahlia think the murder would happen at her home. However, Dahlia was unhappy with this and shared her concerns with Muhammad, the informant. During a phone call between Muhammad and Dahlia, a detective listened in and worried that they might have frightened her off. The detectives were concerned that Dahlia might now change her mind and find someone else to kill her husband. On August 3, 2009, Dahlia met with Sergeant Whitey Jean, an undercover detective posing as a hitman, in a CVS parking lot. However, Dahlia didn't bring the payment, so Sergeant Whitey Jean told her he wouldn't wait until after the murder to get paid. Instead, she needed to give him $7,000 in cash up front. Sergeant Whitey Jean suggested planning the fake hit for Wednesday morning, taking advantage of recent robberies in the area to make the assassination appear legitimate. He explained to Dahlia that he would stage a break-in and make it look like a burglary had occurred. He would then shoot Mike twice in the head to make it seem like a real crime. Sergeant Whitey Jean reassured Dahlia that he would wait a few days to contact her after the murder, knowing the police would be closely watching her in the aftermath of such a crime. During a conversation with Sergeant Whitey Jean, Dahlia had every opportunity to back down from the murder-for-hire plan, but instead, she confidently stated that she was 5,000% certain about her decision, indicating that her mind was made up and that she was fully committed to having her husband killed. Dahlia shared crucial information with Sergeant Whitey Jean about her husband's daily routine, revealing that Mike walked the dog at a specific time every morning and left the house unlocked. This information was key to her plan to deceive him and ensure the murder's success. She told Sergeant Whitey Jean that she would go to the gym at the time of the murder, ensuring she would be absent from the house while he entered. Sergeant Whitey Jean instructed Dahlia to go to the gym by 6 a.m. and informed her that he would enter her home at 6:30 a.m. Following the conversation, Sergeant Whitey Jean was shocked by Dahlia's apparent malicious intentions. Having dealt with many individuals in his work, the sergeant had never encountered anyone who exhibited the same level of cruelty as Dahlia. The detective thought it was crucial to stage a fake crime scene at Dahlia and Mike's home to gauge Dahlia's reaction on the day of the supposed hit, around 5:30 a.m. Dahlia told Mike she was going to the gym, which Mike found unusual since she had never gone that early before. However, he didn't think much of it and continued with his morning routine. The detective kept an eye on Dahlia to ensure she went to the gym and went inside, giving the necessary confirmation to proceed with their plan. Before setting up the fake crime scene, the detective needed to brief Mike about the situation. About 30 minutes after Dahlia left for the gym, a loud banging noise echoed through Mike and Dahlia's house, prompting Mike to rush to the door. When he opened it, he was shocked to find several police officers standing outside. Confused and alarmed, Mike asked what was happening. The detective stepped forward and revealed that his wife had allegedly hired someone to kill him, but the person was actually an undercover cop. The detective explained that the entire situation was a ruse designed to look like a real assassination attempt. Mike was left stunned when police officers appeared at his front door, revealing that his wife Dahlia had allegedly hired someone to kill him. Once the initial shock began to wear off, the detectives emphasized that time was critical and Mike needed to leave the premises right away. They then took him to the police station. Meanwhile, at Mike and Dahlia's home, detectives set up a fake crime scene, complete with crime scene tape and flashing police car lights to make it look like a serious crime had taken place there. When everything was in place, a detective contacted Dahlia, telling her that the police were at her house and needed to speak with her about an incident involving her husband. The detective asked Dahlia to return home for questioning. After speaking with the detective, Dahlia arrived back home to find her house cordoned off with crime scene tape and surrounded by police cars. She asked the detective what was happening and was told that they had received a report of a disturbance at her home, which included claims that shots had been fired. The detective then dropped the bombshell, telling Dahlia that a search of her house had supposedly uncovered the body of her husband, Mike. Dahlia was completely devastated by the news. She burst into tears as the reality of her husband's death finally hit her. The detective, who was no stranger to delivering bad news, thought Dahlia's reaction was unusual. Although she was clearly upset, he noticed that she wasn't actually crying. There were no tears at the police station. The detective started the interview by asking Dahlia about possible suspects in her husband's murder. His aim was to get her to admit that she had hired someone to kill him. He informed Dahlia that her husband had been shot twice in the head, watching her reaction closely. Dahlia believed that Mike would never open the door to a stranger. She explained that Mike was on probation for a stock fraud conviction and was struggling to get off probation. Dahlia claimed that the community was against Mike's release from probation because of his massive debt, and people were unsupportive. However, she insisted that their marriage was problem-free. Unaware that Mike was watching from another room, Dahlia was being interviewed by a detective. The detective told Dahlia they knew the truth about her husband's murder. Then, they brought in Sergeant Whitey Jean, who was handcuffed, and asked Dahlia if she knew him or had seen him before. Dahlia denied having any knowledge of or ever seeing Sergeant Whitey Jean. After Sergeant Whitey Jean was let out, the detective arrested Dahlia for soliciting murder. The detective revealed that the man Dahlia had hired to murder her husband was actually an undercover police officer. Dahlia was already in police custody when she was granted a meeting with her husband, Mike, the very person she had allegedly tried to have killed. When they faced each other, Dahlia attempted to beckon Mike over, but he refused to engage with her, making it clear that he couldn't help her out of this situation. What Mike really wanted was for Dahlia to own up to her attempt to have him killed, but she persisted in denying the allegations. The trial began on April 26, 2011, at the Palm Beach County Courthouse, where Dahlia faced charges of soliciting the murder of her husband, Mike. Mike testified against Dahlia, taking the stand for 3 days. Dahlia's defense team claimed that the plot to kill Mike was merely a publicity stunt for a reality TV show, and that Mike had actually masterminded the whole thing. However, Mike denied any involvement or knowledge of such a plan during his testimony. He insisted that he had no interest in appearing on a reality show, refuted Dahlia's claims, and emphasized that he would never risk his own safety or waste his money on such a scheme. After the defense and prosecution presented their cases, the jury began deliberating. Following several hours of careful consideration, they reached a verdict. Dahlia was found guilty of solicitation to commit first-degree murder with a firearm. The courtroom was filled with gasps and murmurs as the verdict was read aloud. Mike, who had attended the entire trial, felt a mix of emotions. On one hand, he was relieved that Dahlia would serve a 20-year prison sentence, which he considered a just outcome given the severity of her actions. On the other hand, Mike felt a sense of closure, knowing that justice had been served and he could finally move on with his life. However, Dahlia's attorneys appealed the verdict, arguing that the jury's decision was tainted by a juror's remark about Dahlia attempting to poison Mike's Starbucks drink. Although this claim was never presented as evidence during the trial, the appellate court ultimately reversed Dahlia's conviction, ruling that she was entitled to a new trial. Mike was shocked and dismayed that Dahlia would be given a second trial after being convicted of attempting to have him killed. As the state began its second trial in December 2016, it was confident in the evidence that showed Dahlia had solicited her husband's murder. However, to the state's disappointment, the jury was unable to reach a verdict, and the judge declared a mistrial. Undeterred, the state launched a third trial in June 2017. This time, the jury reached a verdict within 90 minutes, finding Dahlia guilty and sentencing her to 16 years in prison. In September 2019, the Florida Supreme Court rejected an appeal from Dahlia's defense team, which had requested a review of her 2017 conviction. Dahlia's defense team then attempted to take the case to the U.S. Supreme Court, but in February 2020, the court declined to hear it. Despite this setback, Dahlia's attorney remains determined to overturn her conviction. They plan to file a motion with a federal judge, alleging constitutional violations in the third trial. This, they believe, is their last chance to secure a new trial for Dahlia. Meanwhile, Dahlia has become a respected figure in prison due to her strong faith. She leads a Bible study group, which has earned her praise from fellow inmates. Before her imprisonment, Dahlia had a young son who regularly visits her. However, due to her circumstances, her son currently lives with his grandmother until Dahlia completes her sentence. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Allison Clay. Allison was born on July 1st, 1968, and her brother Dickie was also born around the same time. From an early age, Allison showed a remarkable talent for ballet, which was fueled by her passion and dedication to the art form. As she grew older, her talent continued to flourish, and she set her sights on becoming an exceptional ballerina. Allison married Gerard Bayan Clay on August 23, 1997. Gerard, an accountant at the Flight Centre in Brisbane, was born in September 1970 in Bournemouth, England. His family moved to Australia in the 1980s. Notably, his father's grandfather was Lord Baden-Powell, the founder of the Scouting movement. Over time, Allison and Gerard built a life together, eventually having 3 daughters and settling in the suburb of Brookfield in Queensland, which attracted many people due to its proximity to the city, offering the best of both worlds. By 2012, Allison had risen to an executive position at the Flight Centre, while Gerard had found success in real estate several years prior. From the outside, the Bayan Clay family appeared to have a perfect life, earning widespread admiration and respect in their community. Friends and family members often envied their beautiful existence. On Friday, April 20th, 2012, everything changed. At around 7 a.m., Gerard contacted emergency services to report that his wife Allison was missing. He explained that Allison usually took walks at 5 a.m. and initially thought that's where she might be. However, as the hours passed and Allison failed to return home to prepare breakfast for their 3 young daughters, a task she did daily, Gerard's concern grew. The police took Allison's disappearance seriously and quickly formed a task force. Given Allison's strong family ties, it was clear she wouldn't willingly abandon her 3 daughters, all under the age of 10. The community was shocked and fearful as a result of Allison's disappearance. During the investigation into Allison's disappearance, police based their operations at a local clubhouse in Brookfield, which served as a central hub for processing the many tips coming in about her possible whereabouts. The clubhouse's ample space allowed officers to organize and review the gathered information efficiently. With a sense of urgency, they launched a thorough search of parks and creeks, meticulously combing through these areas in hopes of finding clues or leads that could bring them closer to Allison. As news of Allison's disappearance spread, the community rallied around the effort, with volunteers pouring in to help in any way they could. The close-knit nature of Brookfield meant that the traumatic event resonated deeply with everyone, and people from all walks of life came together to form search parties, driven to uncover any sign of Allison. On April 23, 2012, 3 days after Gerard reported Allison missing, her parents Jeff and Priscilla Dickey made an emotional appeal to the media, begging for help in finding their daughter. The situation was dire, and it was obvious that something terrible had probably happened to her. However, as the search for Allison continued with no success, Gerard's behavior raised suspicions with the police. Unlike what would be expected, Gerard seemed calm and untroubled, and he didn't participate in the search parties, even though strangers were involved. Gerard moved himself and his daughters out of their home and into his parents' house. When a reporter found him there, Gerard was evasive and unsettling during their conversation. His high-pitched and strained voice was notable, as was his refusal to make eye contact. The reporter was struck by Gerard's behavior, sensing that he was nervous but not genuinely concerned about his missing wife. His responses seemed rehearsed, as if he was reciting lines from a script. Throughout the interview, Gerard came across as detached, going through the motions without emotion. He didn't appear to be a desperate man searching for his wife. Rather, he seemed to be playing the role of a grieving husband. The police were interested in speaking with the reporter after learning that she had found Gerard at his sister's house. They asked if she had noticed any scratches on his face, possibly resulting from an altercation with his missing wife Allison. Upon reviewing the interview footage, the reporter noticed that Gerard was deliberately covering one side of his face. This raised the police's suspicions, leading them to wonder if Gerard had wounds on his face that he was trying to conceal. Eventually, the police found Gerard and noticed 2 deep gashes on his cheek. The detectives were suspicious and asked Gerard how he got those wounds. Gerard said he cut himself accidentally while shaving, but the detectives didn't believe him because the cuts didn't look like a typical shaving injury. Although the police suspected Gerard and his possible involvement in his wife's disappearance, they didn't have enough evidence to link him to it. They kept investigating and gathering evidence, hoping to find any leads or proof that would implicate him. Until then, Gerard remained a person of interest, but the police couldn't find sufficient evidence to charge him with a crime. The Brookfield police questioned residents familiar with the Bate and Clay family, particularly interested in learning about Allison's husband, Gerard. As a prominent real estate agent and former Chamber of Commerce president, Gerard held a high status within the community. However, many described him to detectives as condescending and arrogant, constantly looking down on others. As rumors of Gerard's involvement in his wife's disappearance spread, they gained momentum. Meanwhile, Gerard and his parents worked to avoid media attention, using various tactics to evade the press. In contrast, Allison's loved ones, concerned about her disappearance, maintained a constant presence at the task force headquarters, waiting and hoping for updates on her whereabouts day after day. Their determination gave them a much-needed sense of purpose during the uncertain time while Allison was missing. The police requested that residents examine their properties for any signs of Allison, specifically her clothing. To raise public awareness, the police employed a novel approach, setting up a mannequin along a highway, dressed in the same clothes Allison wore on the day she vanished. This move aimed to increase visibility of the case and encourage potential witnesses to provide information. During Allison's disappearance, almost 400 volunteers participated in the search efforts, scouring the area on foot and horseback. Despite their collective efforts, the community was unable to find any signs of the missing mother. On April 30, 2012, Professor Daryl Joyce, a Brisbane resident and horticulture expert, was kayaking on the Brisbane River when he decided to explore a small creek called Collow Creek. This decision would ultimately lead to a disturbing discovery. As Daryl paddled upstream, he noticed what appeared to be a body beneath the creek bank. His curiosity piqued. He rowed closer to confirm his suspicions, and the stronger the smell of human decomposition became, it was clear the body lying beneath the bridge was human. Daryl was taken aback when he saw the body dressed in the same clothes as the mannequin by the highway. The coincidence was unsettling, and Daryl's instincts told him this could be a significant lead in the case. Since he couldn't do anything more for Allison, he rowed back up the Brisbane River to his car, where he had phone signal, and called the police. The police arrived on May 1st, and an autopsy was conducted on the body found in Colo Creek. The examination revealed that the deceased was Allison Bain Clay, but the cause of death remained unknown. However, the autopsy showed significant signs of decomposition, including discoloration and loss of soft tissue, especially on her face. Despite this, the medical examiner identified a 5-centimeter discoloration on Allison's inner chest, which could have been a bruise caused by mild blood force trauma. The autopsy also revealed that Allison's lungs did not contain water, leading the medical examiner to conclude that she did not drown. This finding suggested that the cause of death might not have been accidental. Furthermore, the medical examiner ruled out the possibility that Allison fell 14 meters from the bridge above where she was found, as there was no evidence of fractures or injuries. Toxicology tests performed during Allison's autopsy found high levels of Zoloft, an antidepressant, in her system. This was expected, as she had a valid prescription for the drug. The medical examiner could not pinpoint the exact date of death based on the rate of decomposition. However, the patterns of discoloration and decomposition on Allison's body suggested she might have died within 11 days of her disappearance, around the time she vanished. The medical examiner believed the body was likely placed in the creek bed, where it was found shortly after her death. Although Allison had no significant medical history, the crime scene did not suggest a natural death. Ultimately, the medical examiner concluded that Allison's death was not due to natural causes. Despite the suspicious circumstances surrounding Allison's death, police investigators concluded that it was not a suicide. During their thorough investigation, they interviewed Allison's doctor, who revealed that she had visited him about a month prior to her disappearance. At that time, Allison expressed concerns about mood swings. The doctor further recalled that when he first saw Allison in May 2011, she reported feelings of guilt, anxiety, worry, low mood, and tiredness. Based on these symptoms, the doctor prescribed the antidepressant Zoloft. After 3 months, he conducted a mental health assessment, which scored Allison 18 out of 50, with 50 being the highest level of distress. The doctor told detectives that Allison's assessment score indicated she was not experiencing a high level of stress and was not at risk of taking her own life. In fact, the doctor believed she was managing her mental well-being fairly well. On May 11th, a funeral service was held in Ipswich for a much-loved mother of 3, leaving behind her devastated family and friends. The tragic loss meant her 3 young daughters would grow up without the love and care of their mother. The service was attended by those closest to her, including her family members and closest friends. Even law enforcement officers who had worked on the investigation were deeply affected, having hoped to bring her home safely, but instead faced the harsh reality of her death. Reporters who had covered the case also felt a sense of defeat, as they had hoped for a happy ending, but had to report on the tragic conclusion instead. Following the discovery of Allison's body in Coo Creek, the police stepped up their investigation to uncover the circumstances surrounding her death, including who or what was responsible. They focused on her husband, Gerard, suspecting he might have played a role in her death, and dug deeper into his background to find answers. Gerard presented himself as a hard-working, devoted husband and father, but what detectives uncovered was a shocking revelation. He was living a double life. Gerard had been involved in an affair with his employee, Tony McHugh, which started in August 2008. In September 2011, Allison discovered the relationship and demanded they seek counseling, which led Gerard to end the 3-year affair. However, Gerard and Tony eventually rekindled their romance, with Gerard professing his love for Tony and claiming he planned to leave Allison to be with her. Despite his successful career in real estate, Gerard struggled with financial difficulties. Moreover, He had a substantial life insurance policy worth $8,000 on Allison, and suspiciously, he filed a claim for the death benefit on the day her body was found in the creek. As the investigation progressed, Gerard faced intense scrutiny, putting him under immense pressure. The botanist expert examining the leaf material found on Allison's body discovered that it matched the plant species present in Allison's backyard, providing crucial evidence linking her home to her death. Based on the botanist's evidence, the detectives theorized that Allison was probably murdered on her backyard patio, and then her body was moved to Coo Creek. The detectives also suspected that Gerard used Allison's car to move her body from their home, as traces of her blood were discovered in the trunk and on the door. On June 13, 2012, Gerard, accompanied by his lawyer, went to the police station, where he was officially questioned and charged with Allison's murder and desecrating her body. Gerard denied any wrongdoing and said he planned to plead not guilty, but the judge refused to grant him bail on June 22, considering him a high risk of fleeing. Gerard's arrest validated the widespread suspicion that he was involved in Allison's tragic death. The cumulative circumstantial evidence had led many to this conclusion, and his arrest simply confirmed their beliefs. While the public's expectations were met, they also felt a strong sense of relief. Gerard's arrest brought closure and reassurance to those affected by Allison's death, marking a crucial step towards justice and retribution for her loved ones. The public's relief stemmed not from a sense of vengeance or pleasure, but from the knowledge that the truth had finally been uncovered and the responsible individual would face consequences. Gerard's arrest provided a sense of security, as people knew that a dangerous individual was no longer a threat to the community. On June 10, 2014, 2 years after his arrest, Gerard Baden Clay went on trial in the Brisbane Supreme Court. During the trial, the prosecution read out a part of Allison's diary, which revealed the problems in her marriage to Gerard. The diary entries showed how insecure Allison felt about Gerard's affair and the emotional abuse she suffered. In her diary, Allison wrote about feeling frustrated and lonely, longing for love and intimacy, but feeling unable to get it in her marriage. She described feeling emotionally disconnected from her husband and expressed her doubts and fears about their marriage, including whether Gerard was faithful. One of the most striking diary entries was written just 2 days before Allison vanished. In it, Allison poured out her feelings about Gerard's alleged affair, saying it made her feel sick and dirty. She confessed to feeling utterly betrayed and humiliated, explaining that she could no longer bear the strain and distress caused by her husband's infidelity. Gerard's defense team argued that the evidence presented during the trial was circumstantial and didn't prove Gerard's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. After 5 days of deliberation, the jurors delivered a guilty verdict on May 13, 2014. Gerard was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum 15-year term before he could apply for parole. On August 7, 2015, the Queensland Court of Appeals heard Gerard's appeal. Several months later, on December 8th, the court reclassified his conviction as manslaughter, citing a fresh review of the original trial evidence. According to the appeals court, the evidence allowed for a plausible theory that Gerard and Allison had a physical confrontation, during which Gerard dealt a blow that killed her, intending to cause serious harm. Following the downgrade of Gerard's murder conviction, a strong public reaction ensued. On December 18th, supporters of the original murder conviction held a rally, during which they appealed to the High Court of Australia to reinstate the conviction. Over 4,000 people gathered at King George Square in Brisbane to show their support for the appeal. Meanwhile, some legal professionals defended the Court of Appeal's decision to reduce Gerard's conviction from murder to manslaughter. However, the Queensland Director of Public Prosecutions decided to appeal against the downgrade of the original trial murder conviction of Allison Baden Clay. In August 2016, the High Court of Australia reinstated the original trial murder conviction, upholding the original verdict. As a result, Alison's father was appointed as the executor of her estate, and the court ruled that Gerard, her husband, was not entitled to her life insurance policy payout. Instead, all the funds were directed towards their 3 daughters. In 2015, Alison's family established the Alison Bayon Clay Foundation to create a community in Queensland that recognizes and tackles the issue of domestic and family violence. The foundation's main goal is to raise awareness about this problem and offer support to those affected by it. Alison's sister, Vanessa Fowler, has played a key role in this effort. In 2021, she co-chaired Queensland's Domestic and Family Violence Prevention Council. As part of her work, Vanessa launched a campaign to raise awareness about coercive control. In this role, she highlighted the experiences of domestic violence victims and advocated for positive change. Vanessa spoke to the Sunday Mail about her insights, stating that she believes Gerard's control over Alison started when she became a stay-at-home mom. According to Vanessa, Gerard's control became more evident as he monitored Alison's conversations using the baby monitor, controlled the family's finances, and even deleted her loved ones' phone numbers from her cell phone and blocked them from calling their house. As co-chair of the Domestic and Family... Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Cody Johnson. Cody Johnson was born on May 8, 1989 in San Jose, California, where he developed a strong bond with his mother, Cher Johnson. In 2002, they relocated to Kalispell, a small tourist town in Flathead Valley, situated between Lake Kalispell and Glacier National Park. During his childhood in Kalispell, Cody spent most of his time exploring the outdoors, driving on long trails with friends, and nurturing his lifelong passion for cars. Those who knew Cody, including friends and family, described him as down-to-earth, charismatic, selfless, and genuine. He was the type of person who would go out of his way to help others once he got to know them. Cody's passion for cars eventually turned into a successful business. He started by modifying and souping up cars for racing in his teenage years, which later expanded to include commercial vehicles. As a custom commercial car builder, Cody worked with his uncle and friends at Nomad Communications, where his childhood best friend, Cameron Fredrickson, was his boss. With a thriving career and a strong support system, the only thing missing in Cody's life was a romantic partner to share it with. At the age of 23, Cody was searching for a lifelong partner. He confided in his friends about his desire to marry a woman from a religious background. On Halloween 2011, he met Jordan, the woman who would transform his life forever. Jordan Lynn Graham was born in August 1991 and had spent her entire life in Kalispell with her family. She was deeply devoted to her faith and attended the Faith Baptist Church, where she babysat and worked with families. Her friendships were all rooted in the church, and her ultimate dream was to become a stay-at-home mom and raise a family. When Cody and Jordan met on Halloween 2011, they quickly clicked. Initially, Jordan was shy, but as they conversed, she opened up. She shared her aspirations of starting a family and her passion for nature and the outdoors. Although Jordan took a liking to Cody, she was only 20 years old at the time and wasn't ready to embark on a serious relationship. They went on a few casual dates, but ultimately remained friends. Cody's pursuit of Jordan changed everything. To get close to her, he started attending her church, First Baptist, and socialized with the same people she did. Before long, their casual friendship turned into something more, although it was more significant for one of them than the other. In November 2011, they officially began dating, and Cody fell deeply in love with Jordan. Cody said that he adored her and wanted to spend all his time with her. Even after just a few weeks of dating, Cody was convinced he wanted to marry Jordan, despite her intention to remain chaste until marriage. Those close to the couple observed that Jordan didn't share the same level of passion. Some attributed this to her shy nature, while others were concerned about the imbalance in their relationship. It was noted that the couple rarely displayed affection in public, never holding hands or flirting. Many of Jordan's friends were surprised when she accepted Cody's proposal in December 2012, a year after they started dating. They thought she wasn't ready for marriage, but they were happy for her anyway. Jordan announced her engagement on Instagram, showing off her new ring with the caption, "He proposed, best early Christmas present ever," and a smiley face. The marriage was set to take place on June 29, 2013, and the planning process began immediately. Both Cody and Kimberly Martinez, Jordan's best friend and matron of honor, were heavily involved in the preparations. However, Jordan seemed to be the most enthusiastic about planning the wedding. She even went as far as to commission a professional songwriter, Elizabeth Shee, to write a song for the occasion. In hindsight, the lyrics of the song appear eerily prophetic. Whenever Kimberly or others brought up the topic of what it would be like to be married to Cody, however, Jordan's demeanor would suddenly change. She would repeatedly ask Kimberly if she was making the right decision, and on her wedding day, her true feelings about the marriage were evident. She was visibly nervous, avoiding eye contact with Cody and looking down frequently. When it came time for the wedding photos, she seemed reluctant to make eye contact with her husband. Despite her initial hesitation, Jordan appeared to have overcome her doubts by the time of their first dance and was fully focused on Cody. However, this period of happiness would not last long. The morning after the wedding, she sent a text to her friend from their honeymoon hotel. Despite being married, she had refused her husband's advances on their wedding night and for the next 6 nights. She confided in her friend that she knew he would want to do things she was not ready for, and that she was trying the old that her period started excuse that night, hoping it would work because if she was forced into anything, she would panic. The reality was that Jordan had a deep-seated fear of sex. A mix of her religious beliefs and true feelings about Cody made her anxious about intimacy with him. The tension built until July 7th, 8 days after the wedding. Cody had planned to go golfing with friends, but he called it off at the last minute because Jordan had a surprise waiting for him after church, followed by some quiet time at the lake. That evening, the couple joined a few friends for dinner at the local Dairy Queen. After dinner, Cody went home with Jordan, and that was the last time anyone saw him. Cameron Fredrickson was the first to realize Cody was missing. As a reliable and punctual employee, Cody's absence was unusual. When he failed to show up well into the workday, Cameron decided to visit Cody's new home, which he had bought with Jordan before their wedding. After knocking for a while with no response, Cameron grew concerned and let himself in. Finding the house empty, he searched for any clues that might explain where Cody and Jordan could have gone, but his search was largely unsuccessful. Cameron's concern turned to fear when he found Cody's phone in the garage, which was unusual because Cody always had his phone with him. This discovery led Cameron to suspect that something might have happened to him. After making several phone calls, Cameron realized that no one had seen Cody since they had dinner at Dairy Queen. At 8:30, Cameron went to the police station to file a missing persons report. The authorities took the case seriously, partly due to Cameron's distress. Officer Chaz Zimmerman was one of the first officers to question Cameron, and he found it strange that Cody's boss had reported him missing instead of his wife. Later that day, Kimberly finally managed to contact Jordan, who explained that she had seen Cody leave with some friends in a black car with Washington plates. According to Jordan, Cody had received a disturbing phone call on their way back from the restaurant, which made him upset. Jordan decided to give him some space, and that was the last time she saw him. Later that night, she went to the garage to get her phone charger that she supposedly left in their car. On her way back from the car, she received a text from Cody. He told her that he had received a message saying that someone was going to go for a ride with some of his out-of-town buddies who were visiting. Cody mentioned that he had no idea who they were, but the person always told him one thing. When his friends came to visit, he would take them to Glacier Park. She informed the police about her previous conversation with Kimberly and provided additional information. She said she didn't know any of the men involved and denied that they had a fight that night. When questioned about Cody's disappearance, Jordan suggested that he might have gone joyriding with friends from out of town. The police asked her why she didn't report him missing, and she explained that she didn't want to worry him by filing a report if he was just going to return within a few hours. 48 hours after Cody vanished, his and Jordan's friends and family gathered at their home, perplexed by Cody's behavior. It was out of character for him to abandon his wife without a word about his whereabouts. Despite this, Jordan stuck to her story until Kimberly confronted her. As the impromptu meeting dragged on, Jordan's discomfort grew increasingly apparent. Eventually, she became so agitated that she flung her wedding ring across the room. Some thought it was Kimberly's odd way of coping, but she was convinced there was something else going on. She called her friend when she got home. The next day, Jordan was called into the station and confronted by the officers about her inconsistent testimony. The officer told her that there were inconsistencies in what she was saying compared to other information he had already gathered. Jordan acknowledged this. Shear Johnson saw police with Cody's phone records, hoping they'd find a lead. They questioned a man Cody called, but he had an alibi. His wife was in labor during Cody's disappearance. The police refocused on Jordan, but her story didn't add up. Then a mysterious email arrived, claiming Cody was dead. "Hello, Jordan, I'm Tony. No need to look for Cody anymore. He's gone." Jordan approached Hannah with a somber expression, holding an email, and relayed the news about Cody, as told by Carmen Tony 607. According to the message, Cody had allegedly slipped and fallen off a cliff in Glacier National Park while with some mysterious friends. Hannah was devastated when she read the email and had to urge a lethargic Jordan to report the incident to the police. Instead of calming their suspicions, the anonymous email only fueled the paranoia of the police investigation. The email's convenient arrival, providing the exact information they had been desperately seeking, and its advice to call off the search, raised more questions than answers. What troubled Detective Corey Clark even more, however, was Jordan's unsettling lack of emotion in response to the message. She appeared unfazed, showing no signs of distress, despite the email basically confirming her husband's death. Jordan decided to search for Cody in Glacier National Park, accompanied by her close friends and family, based on the information in the email. During the drive to the park, Hannah noticed Jordan was in an inexplicably cheerful mood, waving her hand out the window. After finding nothing on the first day, they resumed their search on the second day. It was then that Jordan suddenly discovered Cody's body. "We stood there, and she said, 'I think he's down there.' I responded, 'What do you mean? Why would he go down there? This wall is here for a reason,'" Hannah recalled, still puzzled by Jordan's certainty. The coroner's examination revealed that the majority of the damage from the fall was to his head and arms. The loss devastated Cody's family and friends, but Jordan felt relieved, according to Hannah. With the discovery of the body, the police investigation would come to an end. However, the police still had one major unanswered question: who was Carmen Tony 607? During the initial questioning, Jordan directed the police to Tony Stalkup, a fellow car enthusiast and acquaintance of Cody's. Although Tony hadn't seen Cody in several months, he was concerned enough to grant the police full access to his accounts. Unfortunately, the search did not yield the email address they were looking for, and neither Jordan's nor Cody's phone records provided any significant leads. As a result, the police had to obtain a subpoena from Google to uncover the IP address associated with Carmen Tony 607. While awaiting the arrival of the information, the police re-interviewed Cody's family and friends. During this process, Kimberly finally disclosed to the police Jordan's fragile mental state in the period leading up to the marriage. She revealed that Jordan had asked her on several occasions if she should marry Cody and expressed her horror and fear at the idea of having sex with him. Jordan also confided that she regretted marrying Cody and wished she could undo everything. When Kim advised her to be honest with Cody about her feelings, Jordan responded in a message saying that she should be happy, but she wasn't, and if she told him, it was going to break his heart. 2 days before Cody disappeared, she typed that he had held her down the other night and had been in her face. Then on July 7th, they uncovered that she had intended to talk to him and was terrified of how he would react. Later that day, she ended up at Kim's house and told her how the talk with Cody had gone. She said it had not gone well. Cody had gotten really angry and freaked out, and she had decided to leave so that he could cool off. She had spent the night at her step-parents' home. When the police learned about this, Jordan became an even more likely suspect. The information from Google arrived around the same time and confirmed that Carmen Tony 607's email address was generated from a computer at her stepfather's home. A short interview with each member of the Graham family painted Jordan as the creator, but that was not damning evidence enough. Cody and Jordan's cell phone records were. The cell towers put them at Glacier National Park the night of Cody's disappearance. CCTV cameras also captured pictures of the couple entering Glacier Park at 9:17 p.m. after she denied being with her husband that night. On July 18, 2013, the police questioned Jordan, and when they presented her with evidence, she became emotional and tearful. She finally shared her account of what happened on July 8th with the detective. According to Jordan, she and Cody had a heated argument after she confessed her marital concerns to him. They decided to take a trip to Glacier National Park to calm down, heading for the Loop Trail. Jordan explained her actions, stating that she thought she was overwhelmed by her emotions, feeling pressured, angry, and experiencing every possible emotion all at once. In the heat of the moment, she turned around and pushed him off the hill, causing him to fall face first down the slope. The detectives were intrigued when Jordan mentioned a blindfold, and they tried to link it to a stray scarf discovered at the base of the cliff. However, Jordan declined to provide more information, and despite their efforts, no concrete evidence was found to implicate her in the crime. Throughout the investigation, Jordan consistently claimed that Cody's death was an accident, not a deliberate act of violence. When questioned about pushing her husband Cody off the bridge, she explained that he had turned his back to her, facing the cliff, and that was when she approached him and pushed him in the back with both hands, sending him over the edge. Jordan also admitted to creating the Carmen Tony 607 profile at her stepfather's house and sending the messages. Following her confession, Jordan left the police station without being charged, remaining a free woman. The police did not file charges against her until July 22nd, at Cody's funeral, where she was seen texting on her phone. This act of disrespect completely eliminated any remaining sympathy for Jordan. Rumors swirled that Jordan had murdered her husband Cody to escape their marriage, the only way to retract her decision without humiliating herself and her family. If Cody were dead, Jordan wouldn't need to file for divorce. Her demeanor at his funeral only fueled these rumors. People started questioning whether Jordan ever truly loved Cody. Jordan was charged with first-degree murder, second-degree murder, and making false statements. After reviewing her case, the jury added a charge of premeditated first-degree murder. Her trial began on December 9, 2013. From the start, the prosecution aggressively attacked Jordan, and after a few days, her situation looked bleak. They dismantled her story, raising crucial questions about why she lied to Cody's friends and family, feigning innocence and remorse. The testimony from Cody's loved ones hurt her case, portraying her as a heartless wife who murdered her husband to avoid intimacy. Her defense attempted to claim self-defense, but it seemed unlikely to succeed. Jordan opted for a plea deal, agreeing to a 30-year prison sentence without parole in exchange for the prosecution dropping the first-degree murder charge. However, before sentencing, she changed her mind and attempted to withdraw her plea when she learned the prosecution intended to pursue premeditated first-degree murder, which carried a maximum 50-year sentence. The decision rested with U.S. District Judge Donald Malloy, who had to decide whether to uphold her original plea or initiate a new trial. On December 13, 2013, Jordan Lynn Graham received a 30-year and 5-month prison sentence and was ordered to pay a $16,907 fine. Her case was not reopened or reviewed. The federal prosecution aimed to make an example with her case. Jordan will remain in prison until she reaches the age of at least 52. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Heidi Firkus. Heidi Marie Firkus was born on December 14, 1984, to John and Alinda Erickson, and was the youngest of their 3 children and their only daughter. Throughout her life, she lived to the fullest. Known for her playful and artistic personality, Heidi graduated from high school in 2003 and went on to study at the University of Northwestern in Roseville. In addition to her studies, she regularly attended Calvary Church in the city, a place she had been a part of since her early years. At Calvary Church, Heidi met Nicholas Firkus, nicknamed Nick, and together they led the youth group, serving the community with dedication and passion. Born on February 25, 1983, to Julie and Steve Firkus, Nick was a driven and ambitious young man. He worked as the director of operations at a reputable carpet cleaning company, known for his well-rounded personality and strong work ethic. In 2007, when they were 22 and 20 years old respectively, they decided to take their relationship to the next level. Surrounded by loved ones and in the same church where they first met, they exchanged vows, sealing their commitment to each other. To those around them, Nick and Heidi's marriage seemed perfect. They shared a passion for travel and biking, often enjoying these activities together. As active members of their church community, they also loved hosting dinner parties for friends and family. Heidi had just started an administrative job at a financial services firm where her father worked. At the time, her relationship with Nick seemed strong and promising, with the two of them growing closer every day. But what nobody knew was that behind the closed doors of their home, a very different story was playing out. On the morning of April 25, 2010, Heidi's life was about to take a devastating turn. She called 911 from her home in St. Paul, Minnesota, to report a break-in. Just 38 seconds into the call, while giving her address, she suddenly yelled, "No," and a gunshot was heard. About a minute later, Nick Firkus used Heidi's phone to call the dispatcher back. Panicked, he told them that someone had just broken into his house and shot him and his wife. Overcome with emotion, Nick sobbed uncontrollably, repeatedly saying that his wife Heidi was dead and pleaded with them to hurry. When the police arrived, they found Heidi unresponsive on the kitchen floor with a gunshot wound to her back. Nick was lying beside her, still on the phone with the 911 dispatcher, extremely upset and having been shot in the upper left leg. According to Nick, 1 or 2 intruders had broken into their home, prompting him to grab his shotgun in an attempt to escape with his wife through the back door. As they ran towards the detached garage, the intruder managed to wrestle the shotgun away from him and then shot both Nick and Heidi. Unfortunately, Heidi was pronounced dead at the scene, her life tragically cut short. Nick, on the other hand, was quickly rushed to the hospital for treatment and later questioned by the police. The police asked Nick why he and Heidi had left the safety of their bedroom to face potential danger. Nick explained that they were simply trying to escape the house through the back door. Nick's injuries were treated at the hospital, and he was released just 3 hours later. The police then interviewed him again at the station about the incident. During the police station interview, Nick provided a detailed account of what had happened. He recalled watching a movie with Heidi and having a glass of wine before going to bed around midnight. Nick said he woke up between 6:10 and 6:15 a.m. when he heard the screen door open and someone fiddling with the doorknob. The investigators questioned Nick about locking the deadbolt, and he admitted that although he and Heidi usually made sure to lock it, he believed he had forgotten to do so that night. After hearing the noises, Nick retrieved his shotgun from the upstairs closet. He explained that he had brought it upstairs from the basement a month prior because he had noticed it was rusting. Nick mentioned that the shotgun was initially empty, but he loaded it after hearing the noises. Next, he woke up Heidi, asked her to call 911, and instructed her to leave the house and go to the garage where their cars were parked. Nick also shared that he and Heidi had a pre-planned safety strategy in case of trouble, which involved going to the garage where their cars were parked. Nick, who is right-handed, was walking behind Heidi towards the garage, holding a pair of jeans in his right hand and the shotgun in his left hand. As they paused next to the front door, Nick got Heidi's wallet from the table. That's when the door suddenly burst open. A tall, dark-skinned man, around 6'1" and 200 to 220 pounds, rushed in. He wore a dark hooded sweatshirt with the hood tight around his face. Nick dropped the jeans as the intruder grabbed the shotgun barrel. The two men started fighting physically. During the struggle, the gun fired, and Nick said his finger accidentally slid onto the trigger as Heidi ran away, hitting her in the back. The shot made Heidi collapse immediately. Nick and the suspect continued fighting over the shotgun until it fired again, hitting Nick in the upper thigh and making him fall. That's when the intruder escaped out the front door. Nick told investigators that his house was scheduled to be foreclosed the next day, and they had planned to tell their parents and friends about their situation that same day. Nick explained that he and Heidi had fallen behind on their bills, and their house had already been foreclosed on and sold to someone else. As a result, they were required to vacate the premises, but they hadn't shared this information with their friends or family. Their plan was to pack up their belongings on Sunday and Monday morning, leaving some items in the garage to collect later and find someone to stay with temporarily. The police released a description of the suspected intruder based on Nick's account. The individual is a male, between 6'0" and 6'2" tall, and weighs around 200 to 220 pounds. He was wearing a dark hooded sweatshirt. Later, about 3 weeks after the initial report, the police provided an updated sketch made by an artist hired by Nick's lawyer. This updated description included more details. The suspected intruder is an African-American male, estimated to be between 40 and 60 years old. During the initial investigation into Heidi's death, the police focused on finding an unidentified African-American male intruder, as described by Nick. The area was thoroughly searched for evidence and witnesses to support Nick's account. However, the investigation yielded no arrests or charges, leaving the case unsolved for many years. Over a decade had passed without any resolution to Heidi's murder. Nick had seemingly moved on, marrying Rachel and starting a family. Nevertheless, financial troubles resurfaced, prompting Rachel's suspicions about undisclosed problems. Her concerns about their financial situation and Nick's reluctance to discuss it sparked her curiosity. Rachel began to dig deeper, uncovering secrets and inconsistencies in Nick's past. Her discoveries led her to question everything she thought she knew about her husband and his possible involvement in Heidi's tragic death. Rachel was unaware of the financial difficulties that the couple was experiencing, similar to the struggles that Heidi and Nick had faced in the past. Her concerns prompted her to contact the authorities, which led to renewed interest in the case. Investigators looked into Nick's second wife, Rachel Furcus, whom he married in 2012. When Rachel spoke to the authorities, she had already divorced Nick due to his worsening financial problems. Prior to their divorce in 2019, Rachel had recorded a conversation where she confronted Nick about his deception. She told investigators that Nick was repeating the same behaviors he had exhibited with Heidi, citing a letter that showed they had not paid their property taxes and were at risk of eviction. After Rachel contacted the police in 2020, a series of events unfolded that again brought the Heidi Firkus murder case into focus. Sergeant Nicole Sipes, who was assigned to the case, carefully listened to Rachel's concerns and began re-examining the evidence. Sergeant Sipes of the St. Paul Police Department became deeply committed to uncovering the truth behind Heidi's murder. She took the initiative to ask for the FBI's assistance in analyzing the audio recordings from the 911 call, hoping to find clues that could shed light on what occurred on the night of the murder. After a thorough analysis of the audio, the FBI concluded that there was no evidence of a third person being present during the incident, which contradicted the initial statement of Heidi's husband to the police. This new development left Sergeant Sipes and her team perplexed. If Heidi and her husband were indeed the only people in the house, then what exactly transpired between them that led to her tragic death? The absence of a third person only served to heighten suspicions about the husband's potential role in the crime. With renewed determination, the investigation pressed on with greater intensity. The FBI's findings had unveiled a fresh avenue of inquiry, and Sergeant Sipes was more resolute than ever in her pursuit of justice for Heidi and in providing answers to her bereaved family. The investigators obtained financial documents that contradicted Nicholas Firkus's previous statements, further implicating him in Heidi's murder. They noticed Nick's account of the events kept changing. Initially, he claimed he got his gun, but the intruder took it from him and shot both him and Heidi. Later, he said the intruder didn't take the gun, and his own finger accidentally pulled the trigger, hitting Heidi in the back. Despite thorough investigation, there was an evident lack of signs of a struggle, such as overturned furniture or marks on the walls, at the crime scene. The forensic analysis of the scene contradicted Nick's account, particularly the trajectory of the shot that struck Heidi. Additionally, Heidi's 911 call made no mention of an intruder. The absence of evidence of a break-in or intruder at the crime scene raised the investigators' suspicions. They believed the lack of clues was part of Nick's plan to cover up his involvement in Heidi's death. On May 19, 2021, a decade after Heidi's death, a warrant was issued for the arrest of Nick Firkus. A SWAT team subsequently arrived at his home in Mounds View, where they took him into custody. The arrest was a direct result of Rachel's persistent suspicions and the tireless efforts of Police Sergeant Nicole Sipes. The sudden development came as a shock to many who had assumed the case had stalled and would never be resolved. As the legal proceedings progressed, the details of the case were re-examined, and the truth about that fateful night slowly began to emerge. The burning question on everyone's mind was whether Nick would be held accountable for Heidi's tragic death. Following Heidi's family's statement in response to Nicholas's arrest, they expressed their gratitude to all those who had worked tirelessly to bring the case to this point. They also thanked everyone who had prayed and supported them throughout the years. Although they knew they could never have Heidi back, they believed that Heidi would have wanted them to uncover the truth, as God is honored by truth, and Heidi's life and memory are further honored by truth. When the case went to trial, Nick Firkus pleaded not guilty, maintaining his innocence. Most of his family, especially his father, believed in his innocence, arguing that Nick's deep love for Heidi would have prevented him from committing such a violent act. However, the jury disagreed. On February 10, 2023, the unthinkable happened. Nick, the person Heidi trusted most, was convicted of her brutal murder. After deliberating over the evidence for 10 hours, the jury delivered their verdict, leaving all who knew Heidi in shock and disbelief. In the trial, the prosecution built a strong case by presenting a timeline that revealed a man struggling with severe financial difficulties. They claimed that Nick had concealed the true extent of their financial struggles from Heidi, and fearing shame and conflict, he took drastic measures to end her life. The prosecution also questioned Nick's story of a home invasion implying it was a ruse to shift attention away from himself. The prosecution presented strong evidence, including the lack of signs of forced entry and inconsistencies in Nick's account, which raised significant doubts about his version of events. Most convincingly, they highlighted the striking absence of DNA evidence or physical proof of a third party's presence, specifically the alleged intruder. This significant omission seriously undermines the credibility of Nick's story. Prosecutor Rachel Craker alleged that Nick Firkus refused to accept the truth about his deception, which led him to commit a shocking act. According to Firkus, he took Heidi's life to save his reputation. However, his defense attorney, Robert Richmond, argued that the transition from financial distress to murder was illogical. Richmond pointed out that killing his wife would not save his reputation, making no sense. After intense debates during the trial, the jury began deliberating on Nick's fate. The verdict would determine whether justice would be served for Heidi's tragic death. The jury carefully considered the evidence, emotional testimonies, and legal arguments before reaching a unanimous decision. Nick Firkus was guilty of first-degree murder. On April 13, 2023, the judge sentenced Nick to life without the possibility of parole, the harshest possible punishment. Nicholas Firkus maintains his innocence despite being convicted of a crime in a court of law. He persists in denying involvement in the death of his wife Heidi, even after being sentenced. At his sentencing, Nicholas Firkus acknowledged the harm caused, saying that he understood the pain and loss felt by everyone present. He noted that while justice had been served, it had come at a great cost: a shattered family, a betrayed community, and a life taken too soon. He expressed that the finality of it all was almost unbearable. The verdict finally brought Heidi's family and friends a sense of closure, but it also forced them to confront the painful truth that the person they thought they knew was capable of committing a heinous crime. Nick is currently serving a life sentence at the Minnesota Correctional Facility in St. Cloud, Minnesota. Despite the verdict, the main motive behind Heidi's killing remains unclear, leaving many questions unanswered about what drove Nick to commit such a tragic act. However, investigators did uncover some clues that may have contributed to his actions. In June 2009, Nick received foreclosure papers on their house, which was subsequently sold at a sheriff's auction that same month. This was about 10 months before Heidi's death. Then, in February 2010, eviction proceedings began, with a hearing scheduled for March 8, 2010, which Nick attended alone. The original lockout date was set for April 9, 2010. However, Nick made a successful bid to delay the lockout by calling the attorneys, claiming his grandmother was in the hospital and about to die. He asked to reschedule the lockout for April 26, 2010. But when investigators looked into this, they found no evidence to support Nick's claim that either of his grandmothers was hospitalized or had died in 2010. When investigators asked Nick if Heidi knew about their financial difficulties, he claimed that she was fully aware of their situation and that they had even made plans to move to a new place and start over. However, the truth was later revealed. Nick had hidden their financial struggles from Heidi, and tragically, he took her life before she could discover the harsh reality. In reality, Nick was too ashamed to tell Heidi about their money problems, which included $118,000 in credit card debt and 22 months of late mortgage payments. Prosecutors argued that Nick killed Heidi because he was too ashamed and afraid to face the reality of their situation. By ending her life, he saved himself from having to confront the consequences of his own deception. Although justice was served, the pain and loss felt by Heidi's loved ones remained. No amount of legal punishment could undo the harm done or bring back the vibrant life that was so cruelly taken. It was unthinkable that the person Heidi trusted most, her own husband, would be the one to take her life. But that is exactly what happened in her tragic case. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Tara Lynn Grant. Hi everyone. Today we're diving into the baffling case of a mother who disappeared from her home under mysterious circumstances. The police launched an exhaustive investigation, unearthing surprising and even bizarre clues. As they pieced together the truth, even seasoned detectives were left stunned. This case quickly became one of the most sensational in the country, with its shocking details leaving everyone outraged. Taryn Grant was born on June 22, 1972, in Michigan. She grew up on a farm with her parents and sister, developing a deep love for the outdoors, horseback riding, and helping with the farm animals. In school, Tara was a sports enthusiast, participating in cheerleading, basketball, and the school band. After graduating, she attended the University of Michigan, where she met her future husband, Stephen. The couple started dating and soon tied the knot after her graduation. Tara, armed with a business degree, landed a job at a large international company. Stephen, who had ambitions in politics, initially worked as an assistant to a state senator during his university days. However, when the senator retired, Stephen found himself without a job and began working at his father's small tool-making shop. 4 years after their wedding, the couple welcomed a daughter, followed by a son a few years later. They then purchased a new home in a prestigious Macomb County, Michigan neighborhood just outside of Detroit. By this time, Tara had made substantial career progress, but it came at a cost. Her job required frequent travel, often to different states and countries, limiting her to weekend visits with her family. As a result, Stephen assumed most of the childcare responsibilities. His flexible schedule at his father's company allowed him to spend more time with the kids, but juggling work and childcare remained a challenge. To alleviate this, they decided to hire a full-time nanny. Through a special program, they found a young woman from Germany who would live with them and care for their children. Thanks to Tara's job, they could afford this arrangement, and the new nanny quickly bonded with their children, taking on most childcare duties. With his newfound free time, Stephen also started working part-time as a youth soccer coach. But despite their comfortable financial situation, Tara's constant absence put a strain on her relationship with Stephen. With her only being home on weekends, their arguments became more frequent. Tara held on to the hope that her next promotion would allow her to adjust her schedule and spend more quality time at home, but until then, she was constantly away on business trips. This uneasy routine continued until February 14, 2007, when an unexpected turn of events unfolded. On Valentine's Day, Stephen grew concerned and called the police, reporting that Tara had been out of touch for 5 days, a rarity. He recounted the events of February 9th, when Tara returned from a business trip, only to announce she had to leave a day early, leaving them with just 1 day together. The tension between them escalated into another argument, and Tara began packing her suitcase. Stephen overheard her making a hushed phone call, saying, "I'll be waiting at the end of the street," before she swiftly departed, getting into a dark-colored car. Since then, Tara had been unreachable, ignoring all of Stephen's calls. The police's first question was why Stephen had waited 5 days to report Tara's disappearance. But Stephen claimed he hadn't been initially concerned, thinking she'd simply left early for her business trip and was ignoring his calls due to their recent argument. However, as the days passed, he began to worry when she failed to contact the kids, aged 3 and 7, as she normally did when away. Then, on Monday, Tara's boss called to say she'd missed a meeting, which was highly unusual and suggested she hadn't gone to work at all. Stephen informed Tara's relatives about her disappearance, but they were skeptical, assuming she'd taken a break from him and their constant arguing. After all, Tara had confided in her parents about the strain her job was putting on their relationship and the frequent rows that had become a regular feature of their lives. Her relatives thought she'd soon return home, needing time and space from Stephen. As time passed, Tara's absence continued, and her silence persisted. Eventually, Stephen's concern turned to worry, and he contacted the police. During the police interrogation, the officers noticed several suspicious scratches on Stephen's body. When questioned about a possible physical altercation with his wife, Stephen attributed the marks to his frequent work with metal parts at his father's shop, citing regular scratches as an occupational hazard. Following the station interview, the detectives requested a search of the couple's home, which Stephen granted. Upon arrival, they found that all of Tara's belongings, including her personal documents and purse, were missing, along with her luggage. Stephen also provided access to Tara's computer, allowing the detectives to review her bank account activity. The lack of transactions since her disappearance seemed unusual, as one would expect some financial activity if she had indeed traveled, such as booking a flight or hotel. During the search of the house, detectives failed to uncover any clues that could explain Tara's disappearance. With no signs of a crime, they were left to retracing her steps since February 9th. The local police department, accustomed to handling minor disputes and non-violent incidents in the area, was inexperienced in investigating such cases, given the region's reputation as one of the safest in the country. Stephen was outraged when asked to take a polygraph test, feeling accused by the police. He tearfully insisted he would never harm his wife. The police departed, considering their next moves, but Stephen surprisingly called them the following morning, ready to cooperate. However, just moments later, his lawyer intervened, advising against the interrogation. The police had no choice but to focus on Stephen as the prime suspect, being Tara's husband. Standard procedure aside, they had no other leads to pursue. Tara's relatives, friends, and colleagues all claimed to have had no contact with her since February 9th and were clueless about her whereabouts. Moreover, her bank account remained inactive, despite her likely need for financial transactions. Detectives shifted their focus to Stephen, and it didn't take long to uncover an important detail. His driver's license had been revoked, yet he continued to drive. They waited for him to get behind the wheel and then arrested him. However, Stephen still felt like he was being treated as a suspect and refused to cooperate with the police. His lawyer quickly secured his release, and Stephen returned home. The police persisted in their search for clues, obtaining Tara's mobile phone records in the process. They found that her last call was made on the day she vanished, when she called Stephen from the airport, saying she'd be home soon. After that, Stephen made numerous calls to her, but they all went to voicemail. The detectives listened to these recordings, in which Stephen repeatedly asked her to answer or call back, accusing her of neglecting their children. He also pleaded with her to come home for their sake. The phone itself was turned off, and according to the cell phone carrier's data, it last connected to cell towers near Tara's house on the evening of her disappearance. Notably, there were no incoming calls during that period. As we recall, Stephen revealed that Tara had received a call before leaving the house, with the caller stating she would wait for her on the street. However, upon reviewing Stephen's voicemail recordings, detectives sensed genuine concern for his wife's well-being, accompanied by anger towards her decision to leave their children behind. Despite this, they didn't clear him as a suspect just yet. The investigation stalled, yielding no new leads, as Stephen persisted in refusing police cooperation, accusing them of misallocating resources on him rather than focusing on finding Tara. Conversely, he actively courted the media, which began extensive coverage of the case from its early stages. Tara's enigmatic disappearance sparked widespread public interest, and Stephen became a constant presence in front of cameras, daily pleading for her safe return. As the case unfolded, the company that had facilitated the hiring of the nanny for Stephen and Tara took action, ultimately deciding to send her back to Germany. Prior to her departure, she provided a statement to the authorities, speaking highly of her experience in their household. She also revealed that on the evening Tara returned home, she had been out at a bar with friends. Upon her return, she encountered Stephen, who appeared distraught, informing her that Tara had just exited the house. Despite refusing to cooperate with the police, Stephen hired a former FBI agent as a private detective to investigate Tara's disappearance. However, this effort also yielded no results. With no leads, the police decided to take a different approach. They contacted the agency that helped Tara and Stephen find their nanny, and there they made an interesting discovery. Before hiring the nanny from Germany, the couple had employed 6 other nannies, none of whom stayed in the job for long. When detectives spoke to these former nannies, almost all described Stephen's behavior as not only strange, but also intimidating. According to their accounts, Stephen would rummage through their belongings, ask them inappropriate questions, and frequently yell at them, treating them like they were his subordinates. The police were puzzled by the stark contrast between these descriptions and the German nanny's glowing account of her time with the family. They obtained permission to monitor her emails and phone calls, which led to a surprising revelation. Detectives uncovered messages between the nanny and Stephen, revealing that they had been having an affair. It turned out that the 19-year-old nanny had been in a romantic relationship with Stephen during Tara's business trips, and this continued until she was forced to leave the country. Although the police considered Stephen's infidelity a significant lead, it did not directly link him to Tara's disappearance. Thus, they continued searching for additional evidence. During interviews with Tara's relatives and friends, detectives discovered that almost everyone had disliked Stephen since she married him. They described him as behaving strangely, trying to control her every move, and having poor relationships with her family members. The investigation further revealed that Stephen's former girlfriend, whom he dated before meeting Tara, contacted the police with some information. She disclosed that Stephen had reached out to her several months prior, and their conversations gradually became more intimate over time. Stephen eventually expressed his desire to start a relationship. He took on almost all parenting responsibilities and was a better mother than she was. When reporters asked about their financial situation and whether he had been living mostly on Tara's money, Stephen became angry and insisted he didn't need a penny from her. During the interview, Stephen made accusations of infidelity against Tara, but he failed to provide any evidence to support his claims. Throughout the conversation, he consistently denigrated Tara, emphasizing the difficulties he had faced in their marriage. Meanwhile, the detectives made significant progress in their investigation. Previously, they had been unable to obtain a search warrant for Tara's home due to lack of sufficient grounds, and Stephen had refused to grant them voluntary access. However, after the discovery of the blood-stained bag in the park, the judge finally granted the warrant. As the police arrived at the house, Stephen returned from the interview. Upon being informed of the search warrant, he unlocked the door for the detectives before contacting his lawyer. The lawyer asked the police if his client, Stephen, was under arrest, and they replied that he was not. Stephen then announced that he would take his dog for a walk, retrieved it from the house, and left the premises while the police conducted a search. As the police searched the house room by room, they eventually reached the garage, where one of the detectives spotted a large green container holding several plastic bags. Upon opening one of the bags, they discovered an unknown substance along with what appeared to be women's clothing. Opening another bag, the officer was horrified to find what likely were human remains. In total, the container held 5 bags, and the detectives quickly confirmed that they contained the remains of a woman. The police realized that they had found Tara's body and that Stephen was likely her killer. However, Stephen had not returned, so the police immediately launched a search for him, fearing he might flee or harm someone else, knowing that he would likely face prison time. Meanwhile, officers called in reinforcements to search the nearby park, as only a portion of Tara's remains were found in the garage. Over 100 officers from neighboring districts were dispatched to assist in the search. Their efforts quickly paid off, as they found another part of the body several hundred yards from where the bag was discovered, and later they found the head. Due to the cold temperatures, the remains were well preserved, allowing detectives to confirm that they belonged to Tara. As the search continued, the police found several more body parts, and when night fell, the search was suspended until morning. All this time, detectives were also trying to track down Stephen, but they were unsuccessful. They contacted his friends, and one of them came forward, saying Stephen had phoned him to let him know the police were searching his house and asking for a ride from the street. The friend drove to the location and picked Stephen up, taking him to his own home. During the drive, the friend noticed Stephen's strange behavior. He was terrified, his hands were trembling, and it seemed like he was on the edge of a nervous collapse. Once they arrived at the friend's house, Stephen asked to see his kids and requested to borrow the friend's car. At the time, Stephen's children were living in another state with his sister. The friend handed over his pickup truck, and Stephen took off. The police asked for information about Stephen's phone and credit cards, which enabled them to rapidly trace his journey. They found that Stephen had made several cash withdrawals on his way to the neighboring state and had phoned his sister, leading the police to conclude that he was heading towards his children. They immediately set off in that direction. Just then, an unexpected call came in from Germany. It was from the nanny with whom Stephen had previously been in a romantic relationship. She informed the police that Stephen had just called her, confessing to killing Tara. According to Stephen, the couple had an argument that evening, during which he yelled at her. Tara slapped him in the face, and in a fit of rage, he pushed her, causing her to fall and hit her head on the floor, resulting in her death. The police had no doubt about Stephen's involvement, but they still had to track him down. They searched the area along the highway to the neighboring state for several hours and eventually found the car belonging to Stephen's friend abandoned near the entrance to the national park. However, Stephen himself was nowhere to be found. The police then focused their search on the park, and several hours later, with the help of thermal cameras, they finally located him. He was lying under a tree, wearing only light clothing, and the officers realized he was on the verge of dying from hypothermia. In an altered state, Stephen was talking to trees and muttering incoherent phrases. The police quickly airlifted him to the hospital. Doctors managed to save his life. However, it took some time for Stephen to fully recover. While in the hospital, Stephen was charged with murder, and the detectives handed the case over to the court on the same day. Notably, his lawyer withdrew from defending him, citing that he needed to be able to look at himself in the mirror in the mornings when asked why. A new lawyer was assigned to Stephen, and meanwhile, forensic experts examined Tara's remains. A renowned pathologist who had worked on high-profile cases, such as the J.F. Kennedy and John Bennett Ramsey cases, was appointed as the chief medical examiner. After examining the remains, the pathologist concluded that Stephen's initial account of events did not align with reality. Stephen had claimed that Tara died from a head injury, but the actual cause of death was revealed to be strangulation. When Stephen regained consciousness, detectives visited him in the hospital, and he told them what truly happened that evening. He confessed that when Tara came home and announced she had to leave earlier, they got into an argument, and he started yelling at her. As she tried to leave the room, he grabbed her and Tara hit him in the face. Enraged, Stephen retaliated and then strangled her. Stephen dragged Tara's body from the second floor to the garage and put her in the trunk of her own car. At the same time, the nanny returned home, and Stephen lied to her, saying his wife had just left him. The next morning, he took the body to his father's workshop, making sure he was alone. There, he destroyed all of Tara's documents and personal belongings, and then dismembered her body using a saw. This gruesome task made him vomit twice, but he kept telling himself that if he didn't do it, he would spend the rest of his life in prison. After several hours, he packed the remains into plastic bags and put them in a container. He then returned home, leaving the body in the car for a few days. During this time, he was thinking of ways to get rid of the body without arousing suspicion. To create an alibi, he repeatedly called Tara's phone and left messages on her voicemail, pleading with her to come home. One day, Stephen took his children's snow sled to the park, where the bags containing human remains would later be discovered. He placed a container on the sled and pulled it up a hill, away from the crowded areas. However, the rope slipped out of his hands, and the sled rolled down the hill, causing the container to overturn and the bags to spill out. Stephen picked up the bags, put the container back on the sled, and eventually buried them under the snow in a remote area before returning home. Days later, when the police started searching for Tara, detectives announced they were launching a search operation in the park. Stephen became anxious, as he knew one of the bags, the largest one, was not hidden well and feared it would be found quickly. He went to the park, retrieved a few bags, and carried them to his father's workshop, leaving them on the roof. The day before his interview, Stephen took a container from his home to the workshop, retrieved some bags from it, and brought them back to his garage. The next day, the police obtained a search warrant for his house and found the bags in the container, which led to Stephen's confession. It turned out that Stephen had planned to take his own life rather than surrender, but he couldn't follow through with it, even after nearly freezing to death. During his conversation with the police, Stephen showed no remorse for his actions and would often smile and joke, even when discussing how he got rid of the body. While awaiting trial in prison, Stephen's children stayed with his sister. However, Tara's family was unhappy with this arrangement, and eventually they managed to have the children moved to Tara's sister's care. Although Stephen's family still had visitation rights, Tara's relatives were relieved to have the children out of his sister's hands, especially given her continued sympathy for Stephen and her insensitive jokes about Tara's murder. The trial started in November 2007, and Stephen admitted his guilt from the outset. Despite this, his new lawyer attempted to secure a lighter sentence by highlighting the marital issues that had been plaguing Stephen and his wife for years, largely due to her frequent absences. However, evidence presented during the trial contradicted Stephen's claim that Tara had been planning to leave a day earlier. Her boss testified that she had no additional meetings scheduled and was expected to start work at her usual time. This was corroborated by Tara's sister, who had spoken with her shortly before the murder and was told that she would be home all weekend as usual. Furthermore, there was no credible evidence to suggest that Tara was having an affair. Her boss confirmed that their relationship was purely professional, and this was supported by their email exchanges and text messages. Even Stephen himself acknowledged that he had no basis for believing this. Ultimately, the prosecution was unable to prove that Stephen had planned the murder in advance. It appeared that he had committed the crime in a fit of rage, which could have led to a charge of second-degree murder rather than first-degree murder. On December 21, 2007, a jury delivered a unanimous guilty verdict against Stephen, and he received a minimum 50-year prison sentence. Despite his lawyer's efforts to appeal the verdict, it was unsuccessful. Stephen has since been serving his sentence in prison, but there is more to his story. The murder of Tara garnered widespread national attention, and Stephen seemed to revel in the notoriety. While incarcerated, he began writing a book and sought his sister's assistance to have it published. They even explored the possibility of adapting it into a film, with Stephen considering which renowned actor could portray him. In 2008, new information emerged. Stephen's children confided in their aunt, revealing that they had actually seen their father kill their mother on that fateful evening. They had come out of their room after hearing screams and witnessed the entire traumatic event. When this news broke in the media, Stephen's relatives accused the children of lying and continued to defend him. In the same year, it was also discovered that Stephen's father, who had not supported his son, was overcome with grief and guilt, and his body was found in his own home. To this day, Stephen remains in prison, and he will not be eligible for parole until 2058. Every year, Tara's relatives and friends organize a marathon along the route in the park where she used to jog regularly, and her children always participate. Despite their father's heinous actions, they have found the strength to move forward and honor their mother's memory. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kelsey Turner. Kelsey Turner was born on March 5, 1993, in Norfolk, Virginia, to Samantha Ingram, a would-be model and dancer, and Christopher Ingram, a laborer. As the second child, she grew up with her older brother Colin. Shortly after her birth, the family moved to Jonesboro, Arkansas, where Kelsey spent most of her childhood. After her parents divorced a few years later, her father returned to Virginia and lost contact with his former wife and children. Kelsey developed into a stunning beauty with a perfect figure, ideal for modeling. She wasn't interested in school, preferring to attend parties, go on dates, and participate in events. Her dream was to become famous, feature on magazine covers, give interviews, and walk the red carpet. Although she lacked talent, her youth and good looks were her biggest assets. In high school, Kelsey began attending modeling castings, with her mother Samantha's strong support. Samantha had once aspired to be a model herself and was enthusiastic about her daughter's endeavors. However, Kelsey only managed to secure a couple of shoots for clothing catalogs. At 18, Kelsey married Judy Turner when she was already pregnant. Shortly after, she gave birth to a daughter named Beverly. However, their marriage was brief and ended in divorce by the time she was 20. After abandoning her runway modeling career, Kelsey decided to pursue a career as a men's magazine model. She created a portfolio featuring provocative photos and submitted them to various publications, which quickly caught the attention of several men's magazines. Kelsey viewed this as the start of a promising career and her path to a glamorous, carefree lifestyle, which she had always aspired to. Over the next few years, she regularly received offers for photo shoots. She enthusiastically gave interviews, attended events, and attempted to establish valuable connections. Notable highlights of her career included one-off shoots for Playboy and Maxim, as well as a photo session and interview with 110 magazine. For these opportunities, she traveled to Los Angeles and Las Vegas. In an interview, Kelsey candidly described herself, stating that she was a blonde with a curvy figure and a slim waist, and asked what more one would need for happiness. She also shared that she enjoyed partying, spending time with friends, and living life to the fullest, believing that life is short and should be lived beautifully and joyfully. Kelsey was not overly concerned about her future, frequently changed partners, and quickly spent the money she earned or received from admirers. At 23, Kelsey had another child, a son named Josh, but the father refused to acknowledge him or marry her. As her modeling career declined, Kelsey turned to social media to build a following. She regularly posted provocative photos of herself in swimsuits, lingerie, and revealing outfits, which were heavily edited to make her look like a Barbie doll. She also shared pictures of herself at trendy boutiques, nightclubs, and popular entertainment venues, creating an illusion of a luxurious and carefree life. However, behind this facade, Kelsey, a single mother of 2 young children, was struggling to make ends meet. She didn't know how to manage her finances wisely and spent all her money as soon as she got it. In 2016, Kelsey faced a serious crisis after an incident involving her daughter, who was left traumatized and became withdrawn and mute, despite being physically unharmed. The incident led to therapy sessions with Dr. Thomas Burchard, a renowned child psychiatrist in Monterey, California, which ultimately contributed to a tragic event years later. Dr. Thomas Kirk Burchard was born in Boston, Massachusetts, on February 16, 1948, to a family of a prominent architect and engineer. His family later moved to Virginia, where his father taught at Harvard and the Architectural College at the Technological Institute. Thomas spent his childhood and youth in Virginia. Unlike his father, Thomas chose a career in medicine, specifically child psychology. After graduating from medical school and completing his thesis, Thomas worked as a pediatric psychiatry resident in several prestigious hospitals and lectured at colleges nationwide. Eventually, Dr. Burchard was employed at a public clinical hospital on the Monterey Peninsula in California, where he worked for over 40 years as a highly sought-after pediatric psychiatrist. Dr. Burchard was a highly respected doctor with a reputation for connecting with his young patients and taking on the toughest cases. He had a doctorate from the University of California, Berkeley, and an impressive academic record with over 300 scientific publications, cited nearly 40,000 times, giving him an H-index of 81. He was also known for his kindness, responsiveness, and generosity, particularly towards his young patients from low-income families. He even paid for hospital treatments for sick children and assisted single mothers. Dr. Burchard lived with a woman named D.Y., who was described as his assistant, housekeeper, lover, or fiancée. She was close to him and the first to notice changes in his behavior, which suggested early signs of dementia or Alzheimer's disease. As he approached his 70th birthday, Dr. Burchard became increasingly forgetful, absent-minded, and inattentive. To cope, he kept detailed diaries and notebooks to record everything, including names, dates, and events, to avoid confusion. He always carried a notebook with him containing sensitive information like banking details, account numbers, passwords, and card pins. Dr. Thomas Burchard's trusting nature led him to increase his financial support to those in need from hundreds to thousands of dollars. Kelsey Turner took advantage of Dr. Burchard's generosity. During her first visit with her daughter, she tearfully told the doctor that as a single mother of two, she couldn't afford his expensive services. Feeling empathetic, Dr. Burchard offered to treat her child for free and even gave her $300 to help with her children's needs. Kelsey was surprised, but soon realized that by sharing fabricated, tearful stories about her struggles, she could extract more money from the elderly doctor. At their next session, she concocted a performance, tearfully describing her younger son's illness and claiming she couldn't afford his expensive medication. This time, she specified a fake amount, and Dr. Burchard gave it to her in full. Kelsey's luck had changed, and from that point on, she frequently fabricated emotional stories to extract large sums of money from the trusting older man. Instead of using the money to support her children, she spent it on her own leisure activities, luxury clothing, and beauty treatments. Unwilling to return to her hometown in Virginia, Kelsey convinced Thomas to pay for her rental housing in California, claiming it would be easier to find a job and the climate was better for her children. It didn't take much persuasion for the doctor to agree, and he paid for the apartment. There were whispers that Kelsey and Thomas were romantically involved, and that this was the reason the respected doctor accommodated her every request. While these whispers may have held some truth, Kelsey maintained that Thomas had a paternal affection for her and her children, and was helping them selflessly. This was supported in court by Judy, although she added that Kelsey shamelessly took advantage of the doctor's kindness and his declining mental state due to dementia. Thomas paid for Kelsey's rental housing, bills, and gave her large sums of cash for necessities. He also rented a luxurious Mercedes-Benz convertible for her, rather than a practical family vehicle suitable for transporting children safely. As Kelsey's modeling career came to an end, her youth faded, and she stopped receiving offers for photo shoots. But instead of getting a job, she relied on her wealthy benefactor, Thomas, for financial support. Over nearly 3 years, Kelsey tried to break free from Thomas, blackmailing and threatening him. Despite this, he spent around $500,000 on her and her children. However, Kelsey wasted all the money on luxuries, including breast augmentation and liposuction, hoping to revive her modeling career. She prioritized partying over her children, neglecting them in the process. As a result, her ex-husband gained sole custody of their daughter through the court, stripping Kelsey of her parental rights. She was left with only her younger son, whose father had never shown interest in his child. Thomas was furious when he discovered what was happening, not because of the girl's ex-husband, but because of Kelsey's behavior. He realized she was a neglectful mother who didn't care for her children and spent all the money meant for them on her own desires, entertainment, and clothes. Dr. Burchard decided to have a serious talk with Kelsey, telling her he would no longer fund her extravagant and idle lifestyle. In response, Kelsey threatened to spread false rumors that the respected child psychiatrist had inappropriate, intimate interests in his young patients. Although this was a lie, any gossip on the matter could severely damage the doctor's reputation. Reluctantly, Burchard agreed to Kelsey's terms and continued to transfer money and pay her bills. In early 2019, Kelsey decided to move to Las Vegas with her son, intending to revive her modeling career. As usual, she expected Thomas, whom she continued to blackmail, to finance this venture. The doctor rented a house that Kelsey had chosen and transferred the amount of money she requested. After this, Kelsey disappeared for 2 months without giving any sign of her whereabouts. In late February 2019, Kelsey resurfaced because she was running out of money. She called Thomas, crying, and told him about her severe illness, inability to work, and struggle to provide for her son. However, when the doctor refused to help, Kelsey's tone changed abruptly, and she began threatening and blackmailing him again. It's crucial to highlight that Judy had been pushing Dr. Burchard for a while to report Kelsey to the authorities, exposing her blackmail and extortion attempts. Judy also recommended getting Child Protective Services involved, considering Kelsey's past, having already lost parental rights to her older daughter, and her inability to properly care for her young son. Anticipating a potential court case, Dr. Burchard took steps to ensure he had the backing of his colleagues, keeping them informed about the situation and securing their promises of support. To persuade Kelsey to leave Thomas alone, Judy previously tried talking to her directly, but Kelsey responded with threats of retaliation. This time, Dr. Burchard decided to travel to Las Vegas to verify Kelsey's claims, knowing what he would likely find. Judy attempted to discourage him from going, but the elderly man was resolute. She then advised him to bring her or one of his friends along, but Thomas insisted that this was a personal matter that he needed to resolve on his own. Dr. Burchard set out on his journey on March 1, 2019. On the morning of March 7th, a group of tourists driving through Nevada took a detour from the main highway onto a dirt road leading to Lake Mead. They stumbled upon a solitary Mercedes-Benz convertible parked in the middle of the desert with its windows up and roof closed, but no one in sight. The tourists found this suspicious and decided to investigate. As they approached the vehicle, they noticed one of the windows was shattered. Upon peering inside, they discovered signs of a violent struggle with bloodstains throughout the interior. The tourists promptly reported their disturbing discovery to the police. Law enforcement officers arrived at the scene around noon, greeted by an overwhelming stench of decay under the scorching sun. The source of the odor was quickly located when they opened the trunk of the car. Beneath a pile of items and rags, they found the lifeless body of an elderly man, next to whom lay a blood-stained baseball bat. It was later confirmed that the body belonged to Dr. Burchard, who had been missing for 5 days. Judy had reported his disappearance on March 2nd, when she couldn't reach him at their scheduled time, and she immediately feared the worst. She contacted the police, hoping against hope that he would be found alive. Tragically, that was not the case. The autopsy revealed a horrific series of injuries on the elderly man's body. He had sustained multiple abrasions, bruises, and superficial cuts. The examination also showed that he had suffered severe head injuries, likely inflicted by the baseball bat found beside him in the trunk. Part of his ear had been severed, and his hands bore numerous cuts, suggesting a desperate attempt to defend himself. Additionally, there were bruises on his face with a peculiar imprinted pattern. The most shocking discovery, however, was that the man had been placed in the trunk while still alive, where he slowly suffocated under the intense desert sun. As the police investigated the crime scene, they discovered that the car was rented in Kelsey Turner's name, making her the prime suspect. Judy provided the authorities with the address of the house where the blonde lived and where the deceased doctor had gone, as it was also rented in his name. However, when the police arrived, they found the house empty. Inside, they noticed scattered containers of cleaning agents and a strong smell of household chemicals, indicating a hasty attempt to erase any evidence of the crime. The house had been occupied by Turner, her 4-year-old son, her new boyfriend John Logan Kennison, and 2 neighbors, Diana Pina and Jeremy Eric. Since they had all fled, they became suspects, as it seemed unlikely that the petite blonde could have inflicted such severe injuries on the doctor or moved his body to the car trunk alone. The police managed to interview Jeremy, who recalled that he and his girlfriend had left the house while the doctor was still alive and unharmed. According to Jeremy, his girlfriend had drunk too much and flirted with the doctor, trying to get a few $100s, similar to Kelsey's tactics. This had enraged Kelsey, who accused the woman of trying to steal her boyfriend. The 2 women almost got into a fight, and Jeremy had to quickly take his girlfriend away from the house. He hadn't returned for several days and was unaware of the subsequent events. Police discovered that Dr. Burchard habitually carried a notebook containing bank account details and passwords, but frequently misplaced it. Following his murder, the notebook went missing, and substantial sums were withdrawn from 2 of his accounts on March 3rd. The authorities promptly blocked the accounts and cards, and on March 21st, Kelsey and her boyfriend JN were apprehended in Stockton, California, after a second attempt to withdraw funds. Prior to their arrest, the couple, accompanied by their child, had been evading detection by hiding in motels, constantly changing their location and paying in cash. They later expressed regret for not completely depleting Burchard's accounts initially, and subsequently planned to empty them and flee to Mexico with the money. However, by the time they made their second attempt, the authorities had already blocked the accounts, leading to their capture. According to Diana, after Jeremy and his girlfriend left, a heated argument broke out between Turner and Dr. Burchard. This was triggered by the doctor's refusal to give Turner another cent. In a fit of rage, Turner threatened to ruin Dr. Burchard's reputation by spreading false rumors about his behavior with his young patients. As the situation escalated and Turner became physically aggressive, Dr. Burchard locked himself in a room for safety. However, JN forced open the door and violently attacked the elderly doctor with a bat, causing a severe hematoma and a nosebleed. Diana intervened, begging everyone to calm down. Upon seeing Dr. Burchard's condition, she urged them to take him to the hospital, worried about the consequences of their actions. Before they left, Dr. Burchard promised Diana that he would report to the police that he was attacked and robbed by strangers. The 4 of them then drove to the garage, where Dr. Burchard was seated in the back of the car. Kelsey instructed Diana to return to the house and thoroughly clean up, making sure to remove all traces of blood. Diana started cleaning as told, but heard Dr. Burchard's cries from the garage. Rushing back, she saw Kelsey and Kennison brutally attacking him, trapping him in the car. It was clear they never meant to take him to the hospital, but planned to kill him with a bat and knife. Diana was forced back to cleaning, fearing for her life. Later, she heard the cars drive away, and only Johns returned with Kelsey. From the start, Diana chose to cooperate with the authorities by agreeing to a plea deal, which meant she would reveal everything she knew about the case. In return, she avoided being charged with being an accomplice and received a relatively light 3-year sentence for tampering with evidence. In contrast, her former lovers refused to take responsibility and instead blamed each other for the crime. However, it was easy to prove their guilt because they left behind significant evidence in the car, and phone records showed they were in the desert on the night of March 2nd, where the car with the body was abandoned. Kennison was convicted of second-degree homicide and received a 45-year prison sentence, with the possibility of parole after 18 years. The situation with Turner was more complicated. After her arrest, she announced that she was pregnant, which significantly delayed her trial. While in prison, she gave birth to a girl, and both the newborn and her son were placed in the care of social services because none of Turner's relatives were willing to take on the responsibility. In January 2023, following her lawyer's advice, Kelsey Turner admitted her guilt and was sentenced to 25 years in prison, with the possibility of parole no earlier than 10 years from the start of her sentence. She is currently serving her sentence at the Florence McClure Women's Correctional Center in Las Vegas. In conclusion, it is worth noting that ABC's documentary series 20th Century aired an episode in February 2023 titled A Model Murder, which detailed the heinous crime committed by Turner and her boyfriend against Dr. Burchard. Rebecca Gould was born on April 28, 1982. She became a victim of a terrible crime. Rebecca grew up in a family that went through a painful divorce, leaving her and her 3 sisters under their mother's care. Despite remaining connected with their father, the challenging family situation toughened Rebecca, strengthening her bond with her sisters, especially Danielle, her closest companion. In pursuit of a better life and education, Rebecca left her hometown to settle in Fayetteville, a larger city in Arkansas. There, she enrolled in a community college, working part-time while studying hard. The aspiration for a university degree motivated her. Danielle joined her in Fayetteville, and they supported each other in their shared apartment. During a visit home, Rebecca met Casey, with whom she began dating despite the distance since Casey lived in Melbourne. They seemingly had a harmonious relationship, spending time together with family, making plans for the future. However, trouble lurked, unbeknownst to them. On a September morning in 2004, Rebecca drove Casey to work. After grabbing breakfast, she returned to Casey's house for some rest before heading back to Fayetteville. Little did she know, these moments of peace would be her last. Meanwhile, Danielle awaited her sister's return, unaware that she would never show up. Later, realizing Rebecca's absence, Danielle began searching, only to confront the harsh reality. Rebecca had vanished without a trace, marking the start of a mysterious and tragic chapter in their town's history. Danielle decided to go to the police. She called the local sheriff's department and reported that her sister had been missing for almost 24 hours. The police immediately began collecting information and questioning potential witnesses. The first person they decided to interrogate was Casey. After all, he was the last person to see Rebecca alive. The detectives visited the restaurant where Casey worked and began asking him questions. Casey repeated the same thing he had told Danielle. He had spent the night at a friend's house, and in the morning, he went straight to work, assuming that Rebecca had left town with her sister long ago. Despite Casey having an alibi, the police felt some unease. It seemed strange that Casey had left his dog, which required constant attention, to fend for itself. So why did he decide to spend the night at a friend's place on the eve of his girlfriend's departure? These questions wouldn't leave the detectives alone. The police thoroughly examined the house where Casey lived with permission from him. Rebecca was last seen there, and her car was parked in the yard, increasing the suspicion. Inside, there was a persistent smell of bleach, seemingly used to hide evidence of an event. Rebecca's belongings were all in place, including her purse, wallet, phone, and recently bought breakfast. Her small Pomeranian dog wandered aimlessly in the messy room. The detective's attention was drawn to the bedroom. The bed was messily made, and the sheet was crumpled and overturned. Some of the bedding was found in the washing machine with bloodstains on it. Under the mattress, even larger bloody stains were hidden. Forensic analysis confirmed the blood belonged to Rebecca. Suspicion instantly fell on Casey. The amount of blood found indicated that a brutal murder had taken place in the house. However, Casey had an ironclad alibi. Several witnesses had seen Rebecca personally drive him to work on Monday morning. Then, between 8:30 and 4:30, Casey had been constantly present at the restaurant. Security cameras recorded his friends picking him up in a car after his shift ended, and then the company headed to the movies, as evidenced by surveillance footage at the cinema and store receipts. It seemed that Casey had a perfect alibi for the time of Rebecca's disappearance and probable murder. However, the police could not dismiss him as a suspect. Everything they had seen in the house seemed too strange. Many questions remained. If Casey was innocent, then who attacked Rebecca? Why were her things left undamaged? Where did the perpetrator go, and where was Rebecca's body? The investigators felt that the key to unraveling this sinister mystery was somewhere very close. They didn't yet realize that the answers to all the questions would turn out to be far more terrible than they could have imagined, and Melbourne would soon shudder at the news of one of the bloodiest and most mysterious murders in the town's history. A week had passed since Rebecca Gould's disappearance, and the police were still struggling to make progress in the case. Every new lead seemed to end in a dead end. However, on a gloomy September 27th, shocking news arrived. A passerby discovered the body of a young girl, brutally mutilated and discarded in a shallow ravine outside Melbourne. The police promptly responded to the scene, conducting a thorough investigation for clues and evidence. Despite the severe condition of the body, it was relatively easy to identify the victim as Rebecca Gould. She was found wearing the same clothes she wore when last seen alive. An autopsy revealed that she had died around 7 days prior, on September 20th, the same day she dropped off Casey at work before disappearing. The coroner discovered severe injuries on Rebecca's body, including bruises, a broken nose, and a fractured skull. Of particular note were 2 wounds on her head from powerful blows with a blunt object, which were likely fatal. These injuries matched the shape of a missing piano leg from Casey's house, leading the police to suspect it was used as the murder weapon. However, the leg itself could not be found nearby. Other details from the autopsy also indicated the shocking brutality of the crime. Just when it seemed that the case would remain unsolved, an unexpected development brought hope. A man who had listened to a podcast about Rebecca's death came forward with valuable information. The anonymous witness called the police to report a confession he had heard, which could potentially solve the mystery of Rebecca's death. According to the man, several years ago, he had worked together with Casey, the victim's boyfriend. Once, after a few drinks, Casey had allegedly blurted out that it was he who killed Rebecca. The witness did not immediately believe the seriousness of these words, attributing them to drunken fantasies. But later, having learned the details of the case from the podcast, the man decided that he could not remain silent. The detectives working on the case initially treated this statement with skepticism. Firstly, many years had passed, and memories could have faded or become distorted. Secondly, at the time of the alleged confession, he and Casey were under the influence of alcohol. But what was most alarming was that during all this time, the witness had never mentioned this conversation and had not contacted law enforcement. Why did he decide to speak up only now? Moreover, the witness and Casey's relationship was not friendly. Casey had started an affair with his former co-worker's wife. The witness might have confessed to seek revenge, slander his rival, and cause legal trouble. Alternatively, alcohol might have made Casey reveal too much. Investigators considered both possibilities as potentially true. Despite all the doubts, the police could not simply dismiss this testimony. The accusations were too serious. This is the opportunity to finally unravel the tangle of mysteries surrounding Rebecca Gould's death. So the detectives took up the old case again, hoping to find at least some clues that would confirm or refute the words of the unexpected witness. After over a month of thorough work, the investigators revisited Rebecca's relatives, friends, and neighbors, along with her boyfriend. They carefully reviewed the statements, gathered testimonies, and verified alibis. Despite their efforts, they kept circling back to the initial point. The evidence against Casey was insufficient, and his alibi for the day of the crime appeared solid. However, seasoned detectives had a hunch that the answer was within reach. They sensed that a crucial piece was missing to solve the puzzle and bring closure to this tragedy. All that was left was to locate it. Afterwards, the investigators chose to shift their focus. They started to meticulously examine everyone who had interacted with Rebecca and Casey around the time of the murder. They paid special attention to details about William Miller's visit, Casey's cousin, who had briefly visited town right before Rebecca went missing. Initially, during the investigation, William was not a significant figure, and the investigators had already interviewed him. He had mentioned casually passing by Casey's house, where he saw Casey and stopped to greet him. There was nothing unusual or suspicious about the encounter. Detectives are now reconstructing events minute by minute, and William's role is starting to become clearer. This is mainly because shortly after Rebecca's murder, he left the United States and moved all the way to the Philippines. This sudden distance from family and familiar surroundings seemed quite odd. Unfortunately, William's location in the Philippines made it impossible to question him. Since the Philippines didn't have any relevant extradition agreements with the US, it was unrealistic to bring him to Kansas for further investigation. The only hope now is that William will decide to return to the US on his own and come into the view of law enforcement. During the search for Casey's missing relative, journalists investigating the Rebecca Gould case established a social media group to exchange insights on the ongoing inquiry. The group welcomed individuals willing to contribute their recollections, theories, or conjectures concerning the crime. To everyone's surprise, William Miller himself joined the group. He actively engaged by commenting on posts and divulging undisclosed details, showcasing an impressive familiarity with the location where the body was discovered. William also proposed his own theories about the perpetrator's identity, adamantly asserting the innocence of Casey and implicating the neighbors instead. Such conduct naturally raised suspicions. Why would someone who had lived on the other side of the world for many years suddenly become deeply involved in a long-ago tragedy? William's knowledge of the investigation was incredibly detailed. Eventually, a female geologist in the group discovered a family connection between William and Casey. This revelation shocked the community and made them see the mysterious Filipino man in a new light. The police were notified about the suspicious visitor once again. Investigators realized that William Miller might be more involved in the story than initially thought. The challenge was that the suspect was far away, thousands of miles from the crime scene. All they could do was hope for a miracle or a remarkable coincidence, and that miracle occurred in October 2020, 16 years after Rebecca Gould's murder. William Miller returned to the United States, flying to Kansas to visit his mother, who had recently moved there. Airport employees promptly identified him and notified the police of the arrival of the long-awaited guest. At last, the detectives had a chance to ask the man some questions. William Miller strolled calmly through the police station's corridors, attempting to maintain a neutral expression. Inside, conflicting emotions battled within him. He felt irritated by the obligatory visit, yet secretly thrilled that he finally had the chance to converse with the investigators. It had been 16 years since he last set foot in his homeland. Life had led him first to Equatorial Guinea, where he worked for an oil company, and then to the Philippines. William spoke about his wealth with undisguised pride. He said he had a huge farm, 12 hectares of land, a whole household with domestic animals. Along the way, William let slip that only his elder son spoke English, while his younger daughter knew only her mother's native language, Baya. Later, the conversation turned to the events of 16 years ago. The investigators tried to recreate the chronology of William's movements and activities during that period. He willingly shared his memories. His mother was just about to move from Arkansas to Texas, and William, as a loving son, volunteered to help. At that time, he just had a 10-day vacation, so he was able to drive a truck and personally supervise the process. Miller did not hide that he had met with his cousin Casey at the time. According to him, they were not close, but they crossed paths from time to time. They were relatives, after all. Sometimes, William would visit his brother's house, staying overnight if the opportunity presented itself, but he categorically denied seeing Casey on the eve of Rebecca's disappearance. The detectives waited for William to start talking about Rebecca himself, and their patience was rewarded. As if in passing, William let slip that he had once witnessed a quarrel between his cousin and his girlfriend. Allegedly, the conflict seemed quite serious to him and even scared him a little, so emotional were both lovers. After that, William reluctantly added that he never saw Rebecca again, either alive or dead. After all, until now, no one had said a word about Rebecca's death. Even more so, the investigators deliberately did not inform Miller that they had found a mutilated body so as not to reveal all their cards. And now, their suspect himself was talking about Rebecca's death. Although William Miller's words made it seem like he was backed into a corner, his careless comment about never seeing Rebecca dead raised suspicions with the police. Officially, news of Rebecca's body being found had not been made public. So how did William know about her death if he wasn't part of the crime? Yet, seasoned cops knew that a slip of the tongue wasn't sufficient for charges. They needed more concrete evidence, either physical or testimonial. Hence, to catch William off guard, the investigators displayed photos of his car from 2004. They then calmly informed him that blood traces matching Rebecca Gold's DNA were discovered on the gas pedal. The revelation made William visibly uneasy, causing him to fumble in his statements, offering conflicting. Initially, he mentioned seeing a suspicious individual by Casey's house, attributing the crime to this stranger. Later, he changed his narrative to witnessing a burglary and stumbling upon a bloody bed while trying to intervene. These odd and often nonsensical tales only deepened suspicions of William withholding crucial information. Eventually, William, driven to despair, stated that he was ready to tell the whole truth, and this truth turned out to be strikingly eerie. According to William, on the morning of September 20th, 2004, he went hunting. On the way, he decided to stop by his brother's house to borrow a mobile phone. Rebecca, who was inside at the time, sensed no danger and readily opened the door to Casey's relative. And here, William seemed to be lose control. He pounced on Rebecca, knocked her down, and then began to beat her with his fists and improvised objects with all his might. Intoxicated with bloodlust, William grabbed a broken leg from the piano and began pounding the defenseless victim on the head with it. To finally make sure that Rebecca was dead, William strangled her with tights he found in the room. Everything that happened next, William recounted with embarrassing calmness, as if it were something mundane. He wrapped the bloody body in a suitcase, wiped the floor of blood, stuffed the bedding into the washing machine, turned the mattress over to hide the traces of the massacre, then got behind the wheel of a pickup truck, took the unattractive cargo out of town, and threw it into the nearest ravine. On the way, he even drove past the police station, a kind of cheeky mockery of law enforcement. Having gotten rid of the body, he returned home, threw away the suitcase and the murder weapon, and continued to live as if nothing had happened. The investigators were shocked by the chilling confession they heard. They struggled to hide their disgust as they wondered why a seemingly respectable family man would commit such a terrible crime. William insisted that he had no plans to harm Rebecca, and that there was no romantic or sexual involvement between them. He denied robbing her and claimed he had no personal issues with her. He explained that his actions were a sudden outburst of rage triggered by Rebecca's perceived vulnerability. According to him, Rebecca had not provoked him in any way. She was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. The investigators were taken aback by these revelations. They realized they were not dealing with just a suspect, but a true psychopath, a calculated killer who had been waiting for the right moment for 16 years. It became clear why William had shown such a keen interest in the investigation and why he kept revisiting the gruesome details of the crime. It seemed that all this time he had been mentally reliving his actions, taking pride in what he had done. 2 years after the arrest of William Miller, In November 2022, the long-awaited court session took place. He appeared before a jury on charges of premeditated murder of Rebecca Gould. Investigators had failed to prove his involvement in other crimes. At least there was not enough evidence to bring formal charges. However, even one proven episode was more than enough for a severe sentence. Prosecutors insisted on life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. They argued that William was a non-human, a predator in human form who posed a direct threat to society. Allegedly, if he were free even for a day, he would undoubtedly go hunting again. The defense, in turn, insisted on recognizing the defendant as insane. The lawyers argued that their client was mentally ill and therefore could not be held responsible for his actions. They urged the jury to show mercy and give William a chance to be treated in an appropriate facility. In the end, after long debates and deliberations, the court found William guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison with the right to parole no earlier than 25 years. At the time of his possible release, he would be 72, a respectable age even for the United States with its high life expectancy. This verdict came as a real shock to many residents of Melbourne. Some were openly outraged by the excessive leniency of the punishment. In the opinion of the townsfolk, such a monster deserved life without any buts. Some thought that the investigation had made concessions and drained the case so as not to spoil the clearance rates. After all, Miller's conviction automatically meant the removal of all suspicion from Casey, and it was him that many townspeople considered the real killer. But despite all the skepticism and discontent, the fact remained: one of the loudest and most mysterious murders in the history of Melbourne had finally been solved. The real criminal, a serial killer and psychopath, ended up behind bars. Maybe not for life, but long enough to protect society from new victims. And although not all the mysteries were unraveled, at least Rebecca's relatives now knew the truth. They could finally exhale and begin to heal their emotional wounds. No less questions remained about Miller's other potential victims. Despite his confessions and promises to point to the graves, the case never reached real exhumation. No remains, no new evidence, at least officially. Does this mean that the maniac lied to gain the dubious fame of a legendary serial killer? Or maybe the police decided not to stir up long, dusty cases so as not to once again damage an already fragile reputation in the end. Strange as it may sound, many residents of Melbourne still consider William Miller an innocent victim. Allegedly, his confession is just a forced deception, an attempt to hide the real criminal. Allegedly, he took the blame for Casey, his own brother, and sacrificed his own freedom for the sake of his family. It sounds noble, but too far-fetched, too naive. However, can you be surprised when rumors and gossip intervene in the matter? Miller's sentence, though not ideal, was at least an attempt to put an end to this grim story. It proved that even the most cunning and agile criminals sooner or later get their just desserts, that the truth, no matter how you mask and muffle it, always comes to the surface, and that for the evil done you will always have to pay, if not before people, then at least before your own conscience. Several months had passed since William Miller was imprisoned. Life in Melbourne was slowly returning to its usual course. People worked, studied, loved, and raised children, and yet the invisible shadow of the past still hovered over the town like an echo of the former horror that had sunk so deeply into the collective memory. Rebecca Gould's family tried to move on. Her mother found the strength to visit her daughter's grave for the first time in many years. Her father finally unpacked her childhood toys and photo albums hidden in the attic for so long. The sisters, who had grown up and flown around the world, now called each other more often, as if trying to make up for lost time and share their pain. Casey, oddly enough, decided to stay in Melbourne. He felt he had to prove something, first of all to himself, to prove that he could build a new life despite the suffering and pain of loss he had experienced. Now, Casey rarely visited the old house. The walls held too many painful memories. But when the opportunity presented itself, he would bring white roses to the doorstep, the flowers that Rebecca loved so much. As for William Miller, he seemed to have come to terms with his fate. In prison, he behaved quietly, trying not to attract undue attention. He willingly communicated with the assigned psychologist, willingly took the prescribed medications, and yet occasionally a strange smile would flash across his face, as if a reflection of something dark long buried under a mask of decency. It's scary to even imagine what could be hiding behind that smile. This story, despite its tragedy, became another proof of the inevitability of justice. It may sometimes seem that evil is triumphant and criminals get away with it, but in reality, this is not the case. Sooner or later, retribution will overtake everyone who has crossed the line of humanity, and then there will be no turning back, only bitterness, loneliness, and the burden of guilt that will have to be carried until the end. I want to believe that the story of Rebecca Gould will serve as a warning to all of us, a reminder of how important it is to cherish each other, to value every moment lived next to loved ones, and most importantly, to always remain human no matter what happens and what trials fall to our lot. Because this is what distinguishes us from the likes of William Miller, the ability to empathize, love, and forgive.